Hello and welcome to the second set of quarterfinals here for Pro Tour Eldritch Moon. I'm Tim Willoughby, joined by R&D member Ian Duke, and we're looking forward to head down to the feature match area and figure out who our semi-finalists will be. Hello and welcome to this, our second set of quarterfinals here at Pro Tour Eldritch Moon. The players are seated and ready, and we're going to be starting our match with the #1 seed coming into this top 8, Sam Pardee up against Andrew Brown. There we see Sam. He is the only player in this top 8 where this is his first Pro Tour top 8, but has done it in style, 6-0 unlimited, and then a very strong finishing constructed also. And the weapon that he's brought to the table is this green-black delirium deck, and with Grim Flayer in the mix, Ian, it's a powerful one.
Yeah, he's capable of getting off to a little bit more of a proactive start, getting cards in his graveyard early with cards like Grim Flayer and Lilana. Although I think in this matchup, neither player is really going to be the aggro deck. There's no aggro and control deck. They're both capable of powerful mid-game strategies.
On the other side of things, we have Andrew Brown snuck in at 8th place, and his is a very kind of classic Emerge deck. It's got the straightforward enablers in Primal Druid and so on, and then big payoff with the likes of Elder Deep Fiend and some big Emerge creatures. Go. At this point, of course, both these players, they've got access to deck lists, so they know exactly what they're up against. No big surprises.
Sam Pardee playing a mid-range-ish deck with lots of removal spells and lots of answer cards. It's going to be Andrew Brown presenting the threats in this matchup in the form of his Emerge creatures, and Sam Pardee trying to have the right answers to buy enough time to get to his potentially very powerful endgame of Emrakul.
We can see there that Brown has 2 copies of Matter Reshaper in hand. Those ones very potent as cards to emerge. You know, they are already Eldrazi, but it turns out that they can make for even bigger Eldrazi. But first, a Grim Flayer attack here coming from Sam Pardee. And the Grim Flayer, if it can successfully hit in, really juices up everything that the green-black delirium deck's trying to do.
Yeah, this card really does everything. It's proactive, it gets on the board early, it gets in some damage, it fills up your graveyard, it fixes your draws. Just an excellent, excellent addition to these delirium strategies.
Yeah, an interesting sort of different take on the delirium plan here with Grim Flayer, with the ability to choose how many of the top 3 you actually want to be drawing next turn and how many you want in your graveyard. Sylvan Advocate there, the play for Sam Pardee, putting on some early pressure.
Matter Reshaper, a really nice card in this matchup from Andrew Brown, has the potential to trade with another creature or eat a removal spell and then still get you some value afterwards, which is just what you want in this kind of grindier, mid-range-ish type matchup.
Andrew Brown taking the opportunity to trade with Grim Flayer before Delirium active. Briefly gets a Jason play off it, but Ultimate Price has something to say about that.
And that's just what we saw there. That Matter Reshaper ate 2 cards from Sam Pardee, and that's doing its work right there.
Ultimate Price, an interesting one in this matchup. Can't hit a lot of the big payoff Emerge creatures because they are all colorless Eldrazi, even if they might have some colored mana somewhere on the card. But a lot of the enablers and sort of smaller creatures are able to be hit by the removal spell. Matter Reshaper #2 coming down here for Brown. There we see it. Requires you to have a way of producing colorless mana, that being Yavimaya Coast in this instance. But then the 3/2 does replace itself, or at least draw you a card as and when it dies, and here it trades with Sylvan Advocate before it becomes large.
And that looked like an Elder Deep Fiend going to Andrew Brown's hand off of the Matter Reshaper. Good for Sam Pardee to be aware that that is in Andrew's hand.
So we see a morph here. The only morph in Sam Pardee's deck is Den Protector, so Andrew Brown will know what's up with that one.
Andrew Brown really showcasing the strength of his deck here with all these mid-casting cost creatures that generate a lot of value and then can then be sacrificed to emerge. Andrew's just going up cards a lot here, and I think things are definitely going according to plan for him.
And the exciting thing for me about watching this deck being played is when you have that moment where you cast a big Eldrazi and start saying trigger, trigger, trigger. Lots of different things going on here. We see a Primal Druid coming into play. That a great creature to sacrifice in order to cast one of those big Emerge Eldrazi, because it will fetch you a land as and when it dies.
And speaking of going up cards here, Sam Pardee cashing in the Den Protector. Not cashing it in, rather, but turning it face up.
With Megamorph, able to get a land back here. And also, as a 3-2 now, it's not going to be able to be blocked by any of Andrew Brown's creatures. This green-black delirium deck doesn't necessarily need to go all the way up to Emrakul in order to finish people off. Even just a succession of Grim Flayers and so on doing good work. And here we see Lilana, the Lost Hope, just putting a few more cards in the graveyard, getting back a creature for Sam Pardee, and Ishkanar just sort of waiting there to potentially get involved.
Now, one choice Andrew Brown has here on his turn is he has 5 lands on the battlefield. He can play a 6th from hand, and he can actually get access to a 7th from his Primal Druid there if he sacrifices it to Elder Deepfiend. That'll allow him to transform his Nissa. The question is whether he wants to do that on his own turn to get an activation out of the Nissa, or maybe wait until later. He can do it at instant speed or do it on Sam Pardee's turn to get more value out of tapping Sam's permanence with the Elder Deepfiend. He also has the option to Wretched Griff, sacrificing the Primal Druid as well.
Trigger. Yep.
Looks like he's gone with the Griff plan. So first up, searching for a land, and then he will be drawing a card. All of this before the Griff even enters the battlefield.
Primal Druid, a really cool inclusion in this deck. Nice way to ramp. It's a good early blocker. Gets value from emerging. And here has helped him get up to activating or transforming his Nissa 1 turn sooner than he would otherwise.
Nissa Sage Animist there, glinting and gleaming on the table, but we see all of its abilities there. The +1 likely to be used while Andrew's just trying to gradually leverage advantage. At some point, though, he may -2 to put and a Shire the Awoken World token into play, a 4/4 green legendary elemental.
Go. Now you got 4. Yeah.
So this turning into quite the grindy mid-range matchup, which is sort of what we predicted going into this. Both of these decks capable of generating a lot of card advantage. Both have powerful end games. I think from this point in the game, it really could go either direction, although I would give Andrew Brown the slight favorite on board right now.
I mean, on board is where he kind of needs to be ahead, because in hand, all Andrew Brown has going on is Elder Deepfiend. Now, I say all. Elder Deepfiend, a very powerful card, of course, but he is going to need to draw into something here if he wants to keep pressing the advantage.
Yeah, the big thing going for Andrew right now is that Nissa, and the Elder Deepfiend is going to give him a lot of flexibility to try to protect it. He's definitely just going to want to leverage drawing that extra card every turn and hopefully catapult that into a longer-term advantage.
Pardee getting stuck in here. He's Sylvan Advocate just large enough to be kind of interesting, and, well, the Den Protector, it can only be blocked by Wretched Griff. But Brown here getting value all over the place as his Druid dies, fetching up another basic land.
So Sam's attack with the Den Protector there both gets the Den Protector in the graveyard and allows a second main phase activation of Lilana to take out the Griff. Now, wisely, he does this before casting the Ruinous Path just to conceal information from Andrew Brown. And with that Liliana at 2, that could potentially get back the Den Protector either next turn or the turn after and keep the cards flowing for Sam Pardee.
Grimflare, the follow-up there, and now the board looking fantastic for Sam Pardee here. He's got 20 life, he's got the only threats on the battlefield, and it's interesting to see Liliana playing different roles in different decks, because we've seen her in this deck enabling delirium, getting back cards from the graveyard. But in other decks, there is kind of a protect the queen kind of strategy going on as you tick up Liliana, and at some point do go for that ultimate.
That is true. We actually had a deck tech earlier with Sam Black, who is also playing a different blue-black Liliana deck. He said a substantial amount of her power in that deck was her ultimate. Now, in Sam's deck here, I think his deck is optimally set up to take advantage of the first two abilities. Just early defense from that +1, maneuvering and creature combat, and then the -2 just being so powerful in this Delirium deck with this huge graveyard toolbox and things like Den Protector to get the recursion going.
What do we got over here? Oh, -2. Sure. Sure.
Well, you called it, Den Protector coming back, and of course, even though Liliana having to sacrifice herself to make that happen, we know that the Den Protector can in turn return Liliana, and they can be best buds.
Pass.
Pardee there, he knew about the Elder Deep Fiend, did not want to run his creatures into the giant octopus.
Untap.
Sees all of his creatures tapped down.
That's fine. I'm gonna get another Elder Deep Fiend.
And their Sanctum of Ugin basically setting up Brown to get more copies of Elder Deep Fiend to push things where he's already been able to lock things down just a little bit. Talking last night to Andrew Brown about this deck, he said that it was one that it's kind of exciting to watch, but very operational to play. You're doing similar things a lot of the time.
Yeah, it does seem very, very consistent. Unlike Owen Turtenwald's version of this Teamer Emerge deck, Andrew Brown's is much, much more focused on Emerge and things to sacrifice to Emerge. So I can definitely see the consistency being a lot higher in the way that Andrew Brown's deck plays.
Go to combat.
Brown here looking to get his first points of damage in.
15 plays 13.
I mean, the good thing about his Emerge deck is that it can actually dish out a lot of damage very, very quickly when he wants to.
Plus on your.
And it looks like, in terms of cards in hand for Brown, things working out nicely here because drew a Primal Druid to go alongside that Elder Deep Fiend. Didn't necessarily want to have to pay full price for the Elder Deep Fiend, though at this point in the game it is an option for Andrew Brown. This way round he could potentially fetch up an additional land and make his Elder Deep Fiend a little cheaper.
So Andrew getting in with his existing Elder Deep Fiend there signals that he's probably going to be playing his second copy here at some point during Sam's turn, tapping down attackers, protecting Jace. Unfortunately for Andrew Brown, he could only tick up his Jace that turn. I don't believe he has any strong instants or sorceries in his graveyard to cast. He'd love to see something like Grapple with the Past to be able to turn Jace's -3 into getting back another powerful creature, but does not have that option quite yet. And speaking of options, Sam Pardee picks up Traverse the Ulvenwald on his turn, which is going to give him a ton of different things he could do here. Could fetch up something like an Ishkana or even Emrakul. But first, Ruinous Path takes out Elder Deep Fiend.
Yeah, that the line of play that Sam Pardee had drawn up with fetching it back with the Den Protector. So not necessarily a surprise for Andrew Brown, though I'm sure he would still have been happy if it just hadn't happened at all.
Proceed. No attackers. Okay, second main.
Again, no attackers for Sam Pardee. And this kind of, the spot that he finds himself against this Emerge deck is that there are so many different ways that Andrew Brown can ambush him that he needs to feel pretty confident before committing things to the red zone at this point.
That's right. Elder Deep Fiend, a really difficult card to play against. It can either come down pre-combat and just prevent the attack from happening entirely by tapping creatures, or you can actually wait and bait your opponent into attacking, play the Deep Fiend before blockers, maybe tap down some lands to ensure there's no post-combat play. Really reminiscent of a card, Mistbind Click, which was a terror of Standard past.
Yeah, the Eldrazi and Octopi already, or octopuses, should I say, already having some similarities, but when you combine them in one card, well, it's a potent one. And again, all of Sam Pardee's creatures getting tapped down. This opening a window for Andrew Brown to get rid of Nissa Sage Animist.
So Andrew is able to take out Nissa, which is a huge, huge step for him. Unfortunately, he is running pretty low on gas. Again, would love to have something powerful in the grave there that he could use Jace to recur, but unfortunately just has to take up Jace and play a Primal Druid instead.
So with 2 Primal Druids, is Jace fairly well protected, but at the same time, not a huge amount going on in Andrew Brown's hand right now. He's got to rely on what he's got going on the board in order to be able to keep things going here.
Now, did you happen to see, Tim, which creature the Jace was used on the previous turn?
I believe it was the Grim Flare again, just the trample on it, meaning that it's a little bit more threatening.
Yeah, it's a bit tricky here because there is also the Den Protector, which could potentially come in. Can't be blocked by creatures of power less than it, but it decides to stay home, again, worrying about something like an Elder Deep Fiend.
Both copies of Hissing Quagmire coming in. They've each been pumped by Sylvan Advocate, so there's a big attack coming through here.
I will block 1. Sure. You take 4. 9.
Brown dropping to 9 on that. Sam Pardee, no great desire to worry about hitting Jace here. Jace not really doing a great deal on this board, somewhat unusually. Not even abundantly clear that if Andrew Brown got up to Jace's ultimate, that it wouldn't be a big deal.
Plus on Grim Flare. Okay, go.
And that was, again, Jace plussing on Grim Flare, preventing that threat of trample damage and discouraging Grim Flare from attacking and getting value out of its trigger.
Pardee in the luxurious situation here of not really needing to play out any cards from hand here. He's already in a relatively stable position in terms of threats on the board. Obviously getting more land into play at some point will pay off.
Yep.
And Andrew Brown just, totally flooded out that game, unable to find anything of value to use with Jace, and decides to pack them up.
So that's the very first game. There will be one more pre-sideboarded game for those 2 players, but we're going to get a chance to jump across to our back table and see a different style of match entirely. Lukas Blohon is up against Ken Yukuhiro, and Blohon on black-white control, a few more planeswalkers, a lot more removal, and he's facing down against, well, another variation on delirium, but this red-green delirium ramp. We will get to that match right after these messages.
Put what you've learned from watching the Pro Tour into action next weekend at Game Day. Test your skills and your new standard deck at a store near you. Top finishers are awarded special Game Day prizes, including full art premium promo cards and a champion playmat for the winner. Whether riding the bus or waiting for the Pro Tour Finals to begin, Magic Duels is a great way to hone your skills and try new strategies. Featuring hundreds of earnable cards from Magic's latest sets and virtually unlimited AI and online opponents, start playing Magic Duels free today on iPhone, iPad, Xbox One, and Steam.
Hello and welcome back to this, the second set of quarterfinals here at Pro Tour Eldritch Moon. Our first game between Sam Pardee and Andrew Brown is in the books, so we're going to get a chance to get a look in on Lukas Blohon versus Ken Yukuhiro. Now, Ian, talk us through the decks that we've got going on here.
So Lukas Blohon's deck is white-black control. It's very planeswalker-based. It has plenty of removal spells, a lot of utility spells as well. I would characterize him as kind of the mid-range or control-ish deck in this matchup. Ken Yukuhiro's, on the other hand, is a red-green ramp deck involving delirium and trying to get Emrakul onto the battlefield. And sure enough, it looks like he does have an Emrakul in play. So let's look in and see how this game progresses from here.
I mean, from a flavor standpoint, we know which way it should go with Lilana versus Emrakul. In practice, I'm not entirely convinced that this is necessarily going to match up with the story. But Yukuhiro on just 5 life, so not too much more damage that Lukas Blohon needs to deal here. Though I suppose, technically, Emrakul can quite happily swing in for that full 12. With 3 cards in hand, it strikes me that Blohon could very easily have an answer to Emrakul right now, though. We'll find out soon enough. It looks like Avacyn can at very least jump in the way of the Eldrazi Titan.
Yeah, I mean, the trouble is with protection from instants, it's very hard to interact with Emrakul mid-attack. You need something like a flash creature or something along the lines of Stasis Snare, although it doesn't appear to me that Lukas actually has that card in his deck at the moment.
In this case, though, it looks like Emrakul was going for Lilana first. I guess that in the testing overnight, he may have come to the conclusion that actually, once Emrakul's in play, it's not getting off the board particularly easily. 13/13, flying trample, protection from instants. That covers a fair proportion of bits and pieces that he might have to worry about. And Lukas Blohon here, it looked like he had a couple of copies of Languish in hand, even 2 copies of Languish, not really enough to do more than tickle Emrakul.
Yeah, I mean, with Lukas at 12, the attack on Liliana certainly means Ken Yukuhiro knows about a card in Lukas's hand that would make attacking Lukas directly not win the game there. And of course, Ken, having just played Emrakul, has an idea of what Lukas has access to. So we're still getting the hands populated there, and we'll get that updated for you shortly. But for now, let's look at how these players navigate this tricky situation.
Yeah, it looks like Avacyn and 2 copies of Languish for Blohon here. He does have Delirium, though his is not one of the decks in the top 8 that really employs Delirium quite as much as some of his compatriots. Grasp of Darkness, the draw here. Even if he spins together all of his removal spells, all he can do is reduce Emrakul to a 1/1. Just forced to pass things back here. And Fiery Impulse here, basically just in order to push through a little bit of extra trample damage over this Archangel Avacyn.
So dealing 3 damage to Avacyn and allowing potentially 12 trample damage to trample over. And I think this is going to be game here. The players just agreeing on the state.
So there is 3 damage on your Avacyn.
Yes.
He has to put as many damage to try to kill it. That means +1 to go to 4. And the rest can trample it separately, what he just tried to do.
Okay. All right. So it's 1.
Yeah, the interesting thing being, of course, just sort of making sure that we understand how trample works and all of this. How much do you have to assign to a creature that's already taken damage? Well, you need to assign enough that it would kill that creature.
Right, even though Archangel Avacyn had Indestructible there, the Fiery Impulse providing 3 damage, Emrakul only needs to provide 1 more, allowing 12 to trample over and actually defeat Lukas Blohon exactly there. So Ken Yukuhiro will take that game.
We did hear that basically that's kind of the way that in testing the Czech players had found things went. Games 1 and 2, because there are 2 pre-sideboarded games, not looking great for Blohon, but feeling much better after sideboarding. But we're back on our first table here. Sam Pardee on the left of our screen, Andrew Brown on the right. We have had a mulligan from Andrew Brown, Traverse the Elven World, fixing Sam Pardee's mana just a little bit here. And I've been really impressed with how Traverse the Elven World has played out in this Pro Tour. Early doors, making sure your mana is all sorted. Late game, well, making sure that you draw the best threat in your deck.
Yeah, Traverse the Elven Wall, no doubt a very powerful card. It's a card that R&D was somewhat concerned about. You can make comparisons to cards like, Green Sun Zenith and other efficient tutors in the past. The thing here with Traverse the Elven Wall is it does ask a lot of your deck construction and requires you to get Delirium pretty consistently in order to take a full advantage of it.
So Andrew Brown hoping to get out of his mulligan with Jace. The first one being taken down by Grasp of Darkness. Let's see how the second one stands up. It looks like there's more removal in hand for Sam Pardee, and I've got to think that if you're looking for creatures to kill, Jace Vryn's Prodigy is pretty high on that list. For now, Sam Pardee advancing his board with a Morph. No sideboarding just yet, so these players are going to be playing with the exact same 60s that they started with in the first game. And if the first game's anything to go by, then Sam Pardee does have the tools to establish a formidable lead here.
Okay.
Grapple with the past. Putting 3 cards in the graveyard and giving a choice to Andrew Brown. He can either get back a Jace, a land, or indeed Wretched Griff. Goes for just a land here, making sure that he's going to hit all of his drops, because Andrew Brown's deck can definitely utilize a lot of mana if he wants to.
So one thing I want to highlight here, Tim, is the interaction between Jace and Grapple with the Past just gives tons of options to Andrew Brown going into the mid and late game, because he can actually use Jace's minus ability to cast Grapple with the Past, which can actually convert into a creature. So it sort of, in a way, allows Jace to access almost any card in his graveyard. And that's something Andrew would have loved to see last game, but unfortunately was both mana flooded and, didn't have a great instant or sorcery to cast with Jace.
And then on top of that, cards like Gather the Pack that we saw, they're getting even more cards into the graveyard. Kozilek's Return now in the graveyard for Andrew Brown, and it's a card that he's able to trigger its graveyard ability very, very easily. All of his emerged creatures are Eldrazi creature spells with converted mana cost 7 or greater, even if he's not paying 7 for them.
And we talked a lot about consistency of Andrew Brown's deck in the previous game. This is, I think, what his plan A looks like. This is his deck working the way it's supposed to. He's got Jace online. He's been able to mill a bunch of cards from his library and really has access to all the tools that he wants to have access to going into the mid-game here.
Now, Pardee does have Emrakul, the Promised End, in hand, and when you've got a deck that is focusing on sacrificing its own permanence, how much more scary does Emrakul get?
It definitely gets more scary. It potentially gives your opponent more options to devastate you with that Mindslaver-like trigger that Emrakul provides. But honestly, I mean, any deck is going to be in rough shape against an opposing Emrakul, I think. So.
Yeah, it seems to have been a bit of a win at this Pro Tour. I'm sure that the guys in R&D relatively happy to see that the big hallmark Eldrazi Titan really having an impact on this Pro Tour, as it has done on the whole plane of Innistrad.
Yeah, it's also really interesting to see how the decks have been built to maximally take advantage of Emrakul, which I think was something that was missing the past couple weeks of Standard leading up to the Pro Tour, but the new innovations we've seen here have really sort of unlocked the power of that card. So it's going to be really, really interesting to see going forward how the metagame evolves.
We saw Dame Protector there, able to take down Jace because was not going to get blocked by that Primal Druid. But there's a new Planeswalker in town, that being Lilana. Lilana right now has a couple of options, can make that Primal Druid even less effective, or indeed improve Sam Pardee's graveyard. Ultimate price here, hurting Andrew Brown's creature development, but helping his mana base.
Yeah, it seems really strange to use ultimate price on Primal Druid. Primal Druid is almost a card that is intended to die, and so having your opponent also spend a card to help that happen, it seems like a bad trade for Sam Pardee. But I think Sam's really thinking about wanting to deny Andrew Brown the ability to emerge out of that Primal Druid and give have that extra mana flexibility.
Though worth noting, of course, that Andrew Brown's mana base getting substantial enough on the board here that he's at some point simply going to be able to cast these emerged creatures. And I think that's something that, when I first looked at them, I didn't think was going to be realistic. So another copy of Gather the Pack here, and now with Spell Mastery getting 2 creatures. So Andrew Brown with plenty of options available to him here. Looks like Jace and another Primal Druid there. And a Mana Reshaper. That one big enough to trade with Den Protector, bold enough to provide extra cards to Andrew Brown, and safe from Lilana.
Sam offers the trade here with Den Protector. Now, normally, you're not happy to trade your creature with a Mana Reshaper and be on the losing end of a 2-for-1 exchange, but with Liliana in play, Sam threatens to bring back the Den Protector, play it face down again, turn it face up, and get a card back. So he actually would be fairly happy making that trade and sending Den Protector to the graveyard.
Yeah, a different sequencing of this exact same turn could have been activate Liliana's +1 first on the Mana Reshaper, hence my Den Protector won't be blockable, and attack in. That not the line that Sam Pardee went with here.
Right, and the fact that Sam actually offered that trade when he had the opportunity to totally deny it means that he would have been happy with the trade, and Andrew, sensing that, decides not to block. So good sequence from both sides.
You're at 16? Yeah. Oh, you took an extra pain. Yeah, you should. I missed a pain that I took at some point.
Just making sure that all the damage from pain lands appropriately accounted for here. We are now hitting the point where the big emerged creatures from Andrew Brown's deck, very much a force that will likely to see on this battlefield very soon.
So Sam Pardee holding up both Grasp of Darkness and Murder this turn, but Andrew Brown is able to untap with his Matter Reshaper, which gives him flexibility potentially to emerge from it.
Yeah, many of the emerged creatures available to Andrew Brown do have flash, and that a potent ability because it means that in response to removal, you can cast your emerged creature, make the most of a creature that was going to die anyway.
Absolutely, and Sam, recognizing that, just takes the hit from Matter Reshaper to his Liliana, knocking Liliana down to 3, and post-combat, Andrew Brown plays Wretched Griff, sacrificing Matter Reshaper, getting a card off the Matter Reshaper, getting a card from the Wretched Griff, and really just keeping the threats flowing for Andrew Brown. Andrew in a very good spot right now in this game.
Worth noting, of course, that when you do something like cast Wretched Griff, triggering Kozilek's Return, the Griff's still on the stack at the point that the Kozilek's Return triggers, so even though its toughness would not be enough to let it survive Kozilek's Return when it is triggered from the graveyard, it's not even in play at that point.
And also worth a reminder that Kozilek's Trigger is a May ability. You can choose when the trigger resolves whether or not you want to exile Kozilek's Return and deal 5 damage to each creature.
You have 3 cards remaining.
So Sam Pardee deploying some of his removal there just to try and keep the boards relatively stable. Liliana, the kind of biggest player in this game, at least in terms of what's in play right now, but we know that Andrew Brown has done plenty to improve his hand over the last few turns. That Den Protector just spending the briefest, tiniest moments as a morph before unmorphing, megamorphing, if you will, to fetch back another card from the graveyard. Each player with their own different sources of card advantage in this game. Brown here keeping things going with Primal Druids.
Go. Upkeep. No effects.
Sam Pardee, he's been well trained enough now that he announces his upkeep, knowing that that's one of the potential places that Elder Deep Fiend might come along to tap down a bunch of his lands. Worth noting that we've seen this Den Protector getting back lands enough here that it looks like Sam Pardee might be on a plan of getting up to Emrakul.
Yes, definitely. He's been milling his graveyard quite a bit.
He didn't play it he played this turn.
That was a previous turn.
I don't know. He has 2 blue sources that don't paint him, and he casts 2 blue spells, so I think he probably tapped those.
Okay.
But I don't know for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
We're just double checking here to make sure that the life totals are correct and there hasn't been any awkward tapping of mana over the course of this game.
I'll get a forest and play it. I'd like to do some attacking. How do you feel about that?
It'll happen.
That one is the one that's attacking.
At every opportunity, Sam Pardee making it very clear what he wants to do, such that if Elder Deep Fiend wants to get in the way of that, that he's going to have the opportunity to. But right now, Elder Deep Fiend content to chill in Andrew Brown's hand.
Plus on one of your things. Done with my turn after that.
And stuff.
Yeah.
On the plus
And it turns out the end step is when Elder Deep Fiend coming down.
And I'm going to tap swamp, forest.
I'll float black, green.
Okay, I'll search for
So Andrew Brown tapping down some of Sam Pardee's mana. Sam responds by adding mana to his mana pool. I believe he does have the option to murder the Elder Deep Fiend should he choose.
Well, you know, you can see that little dude for scale in the picture there. This murder that we see in the artwork for Murder, a little bit of an understatement as to what's going on to Elder Deep Fiend.
He's dead.
Never liked that guy.
A nice reprint that's, I think, going to impact standard quite a bit for the duration that's around. Just a very efficient removal spell.
Yeah, it does provide options for these decks. Black already had Ruinous Path to destroy a creature or planeswalker for 1 BB. but that's a sorcery. So Murder gives you that instant speed option, and of course, varying up your card types is very important in these delirium decks. So Sam is playing a mix of those two cards.
Well, Lumbering Falls, it might be slow, but it gets the job done. Dealing with Lilana there, leaving us with a comparatively empty board. Life totals still relatively high, 15 to 14, though, of course, 14 life when you've got Emrakul in hand doesn't look like quite as exciting a life total as it might do in other circumstances.
And Kozilek's Return takes out that Den Protector. Now that Liliana is off the battlefield, Andrew Brown is happy to put that Den Protector in the graveyard and alleviate some of the life total pressure that Sam Pardee has been putting on. Now, a couple turns ago, we talked about how Andrew Brown was in the lead this game. Things have definitely settled down a bit. The board is clear, both players with about 3 cards or so in hand, and Sam Pardee with Emrakul in hand actually is looking to be in a pretty good spot going forward here. He does add another copy of Liliana to the battlefield, and a tireless tracker. So now he is in the driver's seat here with his card advantage engine going full steam and Emrakul in hand as a late game threat.
So Andrew Brown, he has got Nissa. And of course, Nissa very conveniently finding a forest to play for this turn such that there will be a transformation.
A very nice pickup there for Andrew Brown off the top. Gives him a little bit of card advantage of his own, and he also has 2 copies of Grapple with the Past in his hand, which gives him the flexibility to bring back a big threat like an Elder Deep Fiend to potentially challenge Sam Pardee's Liliana in a couple turns.
I'm thinking, sorry. Yeah, no, that's fine.
Yeah, Andrew initially going for kind of what many people see as almost the default on Nissa, which is the +1 to reveal the top card, and then if it's a land, put it into play. If it's not, put it in your hand. But this might be a place where a Shire is actually the choice.
Well, so one thing I notice here is Andrew Brown has 6 untapped lands. If he hits a 7th off of Nissa, he could grapple back a Elder Deep Fiend and then sacrifice the Primal Druid, spending 5 more mana to play that Elder Deep Fiend on Sam Pardee's turn.
So he's gone with the grapple, but taken Wretched Griff instead.
Okay, that makes sense. So that's a guaranteed play, because the Griff only would cost him 4 mana in addition to sacrificing the Primal Druid. So he doesn't need to worry about coming up with that extra untapped land there.
And Kozilek's Return dealing with the Tireless Tracker in play.
I like this play a lot from Andrew. And of course, he gets to pick up an extra card from the Griff itself. So now he's got Nissa going. He's got some defense to make sure Nissa doesn't die. And the cards start flowing for Andrew Brown. Looks like he makes an Ashaya after all is said and done as well.
All right.
But here comes Emrakul for Sam Pardee. And the fun is about to start here. Let's see what devastation Sam Pardee can bring to Andrew Brown's side of the battlefield.
Oh, this is going to get messy. There's a Grapple with the Past still in hand for Andrew Brown, so that entire graveyard live.
Wow, what a challenging board state here. So now Sam Pardee has access to the entirety of Andrew Brown's graveyard toolbox here through that Grapple with the Past. Kozilek's Return, also a very impactful draw there, because Sam Pardee could cast the Kozilek's Return and then, you know, cast something else and flash it back is an option there that he has, potentially wreaking havoc on Andrew Brown's board. So let's look in and see what Sam Pardee decides what to do. So many possibilities here, it's almost impossible to predict.
Yeah, Andrew Brown having enough mana himself that Emrakul at its absolutely most powerful. I mean, in some respects, there are some decks in this standard field that are trying to cast Emrakul very, very quickly. But when you cast Emrakul later in the game, you just have more opportunity to do more things. Interesting to work out when the actual optimal turn is to cast Emrakul, full stop.
I'm just counting out your mana, sorry.
Sure, no worries.
Okay, cast grapple.
With
Tapping green. Return Sanctum of Ugin. Play it. Cast Kozilek's Return, tapping Mountain, Sanctum of Ugin, Forest. Cast Elder Deep Fiend, taking 2 pain.
12.
Yeah, trigger Sanctum. How are we casting Eldrazi?
Two pain.
Okay, 2 pain off of Retrogriff?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay,
Sure.
sure.
Trigger Sanctum. All search.
Sure.
Not that many cards left in Andrew Brown's deck. He's done a good job of putting a lot of them in his graveyard.
And tap 4 of your tapped lands. Then cast this off of this and trigger both of the Kozilek's returns in your graveyard.
Okay, so for those who are seeking to follow along here, what Sam Pardee has done is cast Grapple with the Past, brings back Sanctum of Ugin, plays it, casts Kozilek's Return from Andrew Brown's hand, then emerges an Elder Deep Fiend from Wretched Griff to flash back Kozilek's Return, as well as sacrificing Sanctum of Ugin to look through Andrew Brown's deck. I believe he did not put anything on top. And ends up clearing the board except for the Elder Deep Fiend and emptying Andrew Brown's hand. And, of course, declines to use Nissa on the turn. Now we are on Andrew Brown's extra turn. He activates Nissa, picks up a card from Nissa and a card from his draw step, and now we'll see what Andrew does with this extra turn here in the face of Sam Pardee's Emrakul.
Yeah, on just 12 life here, no flyers around to help him. He's going to have to do something very large if he's going to stay in this game. Primal Druid does not quite qualify.
Yeah.
But another grapple from the past, grapple with the past rather, for Andrew Brown.
Yep.
Picks up an Elder Deep Fiend. That's actually a great draw for him there. One of the better draws that he could have here, because this is actually going to allow him to tap down that Emrakul for a turn and potentially untap with Nissa yet one more time to see 2 new cards on his following turn. So just what Andrew Brown needs to stay in this game, and we will see if Sam Pardee has any responses to this.
Crack my clue using green, so I have black floating. Okay.
Sam uses the mana to crack the clue. This is all during Sam's upkeep as well, so he picks up a card off the clue. Emrakul is tapped down.
I have you at 12 and myself at 15. That's correct. How many grapple with the past are in your graveyard? 4.
Players checking life totals. Andrew Brown at a precarious 12, which of course means 1 attack with Emrakul would be lethal.
Yeah.
And Sam Pardee is potentially facing down just 10 points from these octopuses here.
3 Kozilek's returns, all 4. Okay.
Sam carefully counting how many Kozilek's return might be left.
One on one of your Elder Deep friends. Sure. I'll take a total of 2 damage to play these 2. 13. And it's your turn.
So Sam opting just to tick up Lilana and play a couple more threats onto the board. Andrew Brown in rough shape here, but does get to untap, does get to see a new draw step, and does get to use Nissa one more time. So we'll see what he comes up with here.
I think I'm dead.
Just a pair of lands. And that'll be a scoop for Andrew Brown. So Emrakul does it there for Sam Pardee in incredible fashion.
Going into the sideboarded games, Pardee already 2 games up, looking to win just 1 more if he's going to advance to the semi-final here at Pro Tour Eldritch Moon. So we will get a chance to jump back across to our other match here. We have Lukas Blohon up against Ken Yukuhiro. Both these players have been waiting patiently in order to be able to make sure we can catch as much of their match on camera as possible.
So that was such an intense match there. It's almost tough transitioning back into Blohon versus Yukuhiro, but just to bring you guys back into it, we do have white-black control versus red-green ramp. We saw the end of the last game. Ken Yukuhiro did take it down with Emrakul, but here we have a fresh start for both players. We do believe Lukas Blohon is not favored here pre-board, and with Yukuhiro up a game, this is an opportunity for Yukuhiro to get a 2-0 lead, but we will see how this plays out.
The players are just contemplating how they're going to kick things off here. We can see there Lukas Blohon on black-white control. This time round, he does have the play. So not too many fireworks in the early turns of this game, but that's not necessarily surprising. Both these decks, looking to do big things in the late game. The difference is that Ken Yukuhiro's deck, well, it can kind of get to the late game a little faster because it's the one running acceleration, either in terms of discarding cards and making Emrakul, cost a little bit less, or indeed simply ramping out mana.
So to understand why we've characterized this as a matchup that's potentially unfavorable for Lukas Blohon, thinking about these as macro archetypes of Magic decks, basically we have Lukas Blohon is a control deck that is metagamed as an anti-creature deck. So it's very good at answering small creatures and lots of creatures, decks like Bant Company, for example. Ken Yukuhiro is not interested in playing early creatures and attacking for damage. He is instead trying to ramp into a very, very powerful late game of playing cards like Emrakul and cycling through his deck with cards like Tormenting Voice. So he's not trying to interact on the board early, whereas so many of Lukas Blohon's cards are focused on preventing early interaction, things like Lilana and Languish. And those are just not going to be effective for him in this matchup.
Though, of course, something to be said about Liliana, when you're on the play and you cast her on turn 3 and start ticking her up, you do have a game plan against these decks that are not committing much to the board in the early turns of the game.
Yeah, that is a very, very good point, Tim. We have seen Liliana's ultimate be very relevant in some games throughout this tournament, and this could be one of them.
I mean, of course, Ken Yukuhiro's deck, it's got red in it. It does have ways of dealing damage if needed. We can see Collective Defiance in hand there for him. That one, he's been using it quite a lot simply to cycle through his deck faster, discard his hand, draw new cards, but a lot of options available on it, and a very, very powerful Emerge card Escalate card in this deck.
Absolutely. This is a card that kind of snuck under the radar amidst the discussion of all the other powerful cards in Eldritch Moon, and there are many. But Collective Defiance, just a nice utility spell that gives a lot of flexibility to a deck like Ken Yukuhiro's. But here comes Chandra Flamecaller, ticking up for 2 3/1s, coming in for 6 damage. I imagine these are directed at Liliana here. The question for Lukas Blohon is he going to spend a removal spell to protect Liliana for a turn? The answer is no, and Liliana will fall.
Draws a Ruinous Path for the turn, though, so it's not as if Chandra's hanging around for long, but an even better way of dealing with Chandra is, well, that's Sorin.
Wow, this is a Planeswalker brawl here, Tim. This is Chandra takes out Liliana, then Sorin tags in, takes out Chandra.
Yeah, taking 5 of the 6 loyalty to deal with it, but turns out Chandra, she's back. She's annoyed.
She is not defeated so easily, and down goes Sorin, Grim Nemesis. I love this.
Yeah, exciting magic here of a whole different kind than what we've seen in previous matches in this top 8, and there's the Ruinous Path. So in successive turns, we've seen 4 Planeswalkers die now?
Yeah, quite a back and forth. Wow, and Lukas Blohon ending up on top here from that exchange, gets in 4 damage as well with his 4/4 Awakened Swamp.
And that one of the many benefits for sequencing things as he did, able to play the Ruinous Path a little later, in addition being able to use its Awakened cost. Target very much acquired for the World Breaker in Yukuhiro's hand now.
And this looks like, was that Collective Defiance there?
It was a Collective Defiance. Went to Lukas Blohon, amongst other things. And these players here, pacey play as Kalitas, Traitor of Get, comes into play. That will make all of Lukas Blohon's removal all the more effective, though it must be said, not too many targets for it on Yukuhiro's side, so just a straightforward 3/4 lifelink a fair proportion of the time.
Looks like Ken Yukuhiro has picked up Emrakul there.
And a lot of lands already in play. A very real chance that we're going to see an Eldrazi Titan, if not this turn, very soon. So we saw there a Hangerback Walker for 0 in order to get extra card types in the graveyard, meaning that Emrakul able to be cast here. And Lukas Blohon pointing out that he does get a zombie out of this, so it doesn't actually go to the graveyard.
Oh, wow, that's huge. So Ken Yukuhiro tried to play Hangerback Walker for 0, sending it to the graveyard right away. Didn't realize Lukas Blohon has Kalitas in play. And the Hangerback Walker actually gets exiled, giving Lukas a zombie. And I believe that prevents Yukuhiro from having enough to cast Emrakul here. Potentially a huge mistake from Ken Yukuhiro.
Yeah, Yukuhiro having to do a spot readjustment here. Goes for another Collective Defiance. And it looks like he's figured out that he needs to just deal with that Kalitas now. Unfortunately, did not do so sooner. Takes a little hit from that zombie, and Lukas Blohon here, one of the nicer additions to his deck, just in the mana base here. Blighted Fen, meaning that he's able to deal with an Emrakul in a way that Emrakul herself cannot mess with. The Blighted Fen, of course, meaning you can make target opponent sacrifice a creature, and of course, well, that doesn't necessarily help Emrakul too much.
Oh, wow. But here comes Worldbreaker to take out that Blighted Fen.
And of course, because Worldbreaker's ability to exile target artifact, enchantment, or land is a cast trigger, no real point in activating the Fen in response.
Wow. Huge, huge game changer there. If Ken Yukuhiro did not have that Worldbreaker, he would have been unable to cast his Emrakul, or not unable, rather, but he would have been unable to stop Lukas Blohon from answering the Emrakul because, again, Blighted Fen can only target an opponent and makes you sacrifice a creature no matter how big it is. But that Worldbreaker just hugely changing the way this game would have played out. And Ken Yukuhiro now in really good shape.
No, Transgress the Mind taking Emrakul, meaning that at least Lukas Blohon's life total of 11 not completely harmed here, and removal on Worldbreaker, clearing the board for now. I mean, this is what the black-white deck does. It kills off creatures. Even in the face of an Eldrazi menace, it is able to keep a board relatively clear, and Shambling Vent able to protect Lukas Blohon's life total just a bit. Advancing to 13 and up to 15 means that he's at least going to be able to take a single hit from Emrakul here.
These players playing blisteringly fast. Lukas Blohon just the last 2 turns drew 2 lands off the top. He has no cards in hand, just chipping away for 2 damage each turn with the Shambling Vent, but Ken Yukuhiro also unable to come up with anything proactive to do. Finally draws into a Fiery Impulse here, I believe, so he can take out this Shambling Vent if he wants to, perhaps declines to.
A second copy of Shambling Vent here for Lukas Blohon. His clock got a little bit faster. It seems crazy that we're watching attacks for 2 to deal with a game here when we've been used to attacks for 13, but if that's how it works, then I'm sure that Lukas Blohon does not mind. Loses one of his copies of Shambling Vents to a Fiery Impulse there, but the second one just keeps on trucking. Lukas Blohon back above 20 life now.
And Ken Yukuhiro picks up a Collective Defiance, which can allow him to exchange all of those otherwise useless cards in his hand for fresh new cards.
Carefully counting up his lands here, carefully counting up his card types in graveyard. Wants to know where he's going to be at after this Collective Defiance before he does too much with it. Getting some damage in on Lukas Blohon on top. 3 new cards. Well, all live. Ishkanar there alongside a Hangerback Walker, and the last card didn't quite make out there.
Hangerback Walker, if that is indeed what he drew here, is a very nice pickup. Provided Lukas does not have a way to exile it, that's just going to provide a ton of value here for Ken Yukuhiro.
Yeah, Lukas Blohon has done a great job of capitalizing on the little missteps from Ken Yukuhiro, but Ishkanar Graf Widow coming down now, providing a great shield for what Ken Yukuhiro's got going on. You can see the legendary spider there, 3/5, bringing 3 spider friends alongside her, 3/1/2 green reach spiders, and well, that enough to gum up the board and potentially start attacking in here. Languish from Lukas Blohon, he will not be denied. Just a 0/1 Graf Widow left in play, of course growing back up again at the start of Yukuhiro's turn, but 1 creature certainly not as big a worry as the 4 that Yukuhiro initially presented. Attacks coming in and Lukas Blohon having a little think. Tormenting Voice, the other cards in Yukuhiro's hand.
Now, I really like the way that Yukuhiro has built his deck here. Having 4 copies of Tormenting Voice in a ramp deck like this is just a huge angle where if the game goes long like this and it's an attrition battle, Tormenting Voice just lets you exchange lands off the top for more cards, more chances to see something impactful like an Emrakul.
And Emrakul's exactly what he's drawn off a Tormenting Voice. So here we see Ken Yukuhiro counting up his lands. There's plenty of them there, but he's starting things off with another Hangerback Walker and Avacyn coming down for Lukas.
Wow. Avacyn with Ken Yukuhiro at just 8 points of life here. That represents a 2-turn clock.
And flash, of course, meaning that pseudo haste for the Avacyn and
And
another
is that
massive
Anguished
play.
Unmaking? Wow.
Anguished Unmaking, exiling the Hangerback Walker, no tokens for Ken Yukuhiro, and it means that the path clear on the ground as well for an attack from Shambling Vent. And Ken Yukuhiro's life total here, just 2 points left. Yes, Lukas Blohon had to pay 3 points of life in order to cast Anguish Unmaking. He does not mind one jot.
Wow, but here comes Emrakul. So if Ken Yukuhiro did not have a creature or a removal spell this turn, Lukas Blohon would have lethal on board with the Shambling Vent and Avacyn. Unfortunately for him, Ken Yukuhiro does have that Emrakul he picked up last turn, and here it comes. Also adds a Tormenting Voice to increase his options, and this will potentially wreak havoc on Lukas Blohon's board state on this turn here.
Well, if you're looking for a board where there's not too many ways that your opponent can mess you up, this is a fairly good one that Lukas Blohon's put together. Yes, he's taking some pain off those Caves of Koalos. Yes, he's losing his creatures, but in terms of Emrakul turns, this one a relatively calm one. Unfortunately for Lukas Blohon, his life total still not super exciting. Interesting to note, of course, that that attack by Shambling Vent does gain Lukas Blohon a little bit of life. If it weren't for Ishkanar, this would not be a lethal attack. But in spite of everything, on 2 life, Ken Yukuhiro finding a way of winning his game 2. We've heard from the testing that this is how the Czech players expected this to go. We will find out soon enough whether or not sideboards change that.
Can't wait to see those sideboarded games.
We will have a little bit of a wait, though, because we are now moving across to see our games from Sam Pardee and Andrew Brown. Sam Pardee and Andrew Brown, they've been patiently waiting just as that game was going on, but we will jump back to see them now. Gather the pack early on here for Andrew Brown. No spell mastery just yet, so he just gets the one creature, that creature being the flyer. Andrew Brown has taken a single mulligan here, so anything he can do to improve the card quality in his hand will be very much appreciated. And Emrakul, the Promised End, not a main deck inclusion for Brown, but has come in out of the sideboard for him now that we are in Game 3, because both of our matches here in the second set of quarterfinals, one player leading 2 games to 0. Sideboard changes need to be gigantic, and we have just received some information as to how the sideboarding's gone in this match.
Yes, indeed. So Andrew Brown has brought in a copy of Traverse. He's brought in 2 Kiora, Master of Depths, a Worldbreaker, and the Emrakul, and has trimmed some Gather the Pack, Shaman of Forgotten Ways, Wretched Griff, and 1 Jace. So some trimming and some bringing in of some additional threats in the form of Kiora, Worldbreaker, and Emrakul.
Yeah, as much as some copies of Gather the Pack removed, it looks like all of the remainders still available to Andrew Brown. He's cast a second one here.
And as far as Sam Pardee's sideboarding goes, he is also opting to go bigger. He's boarded out all 4 of his Grimflayers, trimmed a Liliana, Languish, and Ishkana, and has brought in additional Hand Disruption, Transgress the Mind, Infinite Obliteration, and also Dark Petition, so he can find those cards in the later game, as well as 2 copies of Kalitas, which are especially punishing against Andrew Brown's Matter Reshapers and Primal Druids.
So for now, Liliana coming into play and ticking up. That a bit of a departure from what we've seen in previous iterations of Black-Green Delirium, where often on a relatively quiet board, Liliana will simply work on improving your graveyard. But it looks like for now, Sam Pardee is building up loyalty where he can, so he can use her later. Pardee here has to respect that there could be a creature emerging this very next turn with that Primal Druid in play and 4 lands already for Andrew Brown. Going with the Planeswalker plan, though, casting Nissa Varswood Seer, searching up a forest.
And again, Sam Pardee, with plenty of removal spells in his hand, does have the option to take out that Primal Druid to prevent a creature from emerging next turn on Andrew Brown's turn. But again, that trade is just so painful to make. Trading a card away while ramping up your opponent's mana. And I really like that Sam Pardee is just advancing his board with Nissa, making sure that he's hitting his land drops. This game is likely to go long, so both players just making sure they want to keep the cards flowing, want to keep those lands hitting the battlefield turn after turn.
Well, there is our emerged creature, and with Kozilek's return, that enough to deal with Nissa. Liliana, well, for now she can stay hanging out. Andrew Brown here needs to win 3 on the bounce if he's going to advance to our semi-finals here at Pro Tour Eldritch Moon. Had a fantastic run to make it to this top 8. I know that sort of lots of different milestones for him potentially depending on where he finished. Even at the end of the Swiss yesterday, he knew that he'd locked up platinum with his win. Top 8 meant that he was still alive to potentially score a world slot as well, depending on where he finished. And that, of course, something that he was very excited to potentially achieve.
So Andrew Brown with a nice value turn there, sacrificing Primal Druid. Wretched Griff picks up a card. Kozilek's return takes out Nissa, but now headed back to Sam Pardee's turn. He end of turn cracks his Evolving Wilds, and now will have 5 mana, which lets him cast, for example, Grasp of Darkness on the Wretched Griff, -2 Liliana to bring back Nissa and replay the Nissa again. So he's at least got that as a baseline solid turn here. Let's see what he does. Sam Pardee with a hand chock full of removal, lots of options here. Did pick up a Dark Petition that turn, which may change that line of play I just described.
Yeah, Dark Petition, one of the cards that's been brought in, does set him up to do things like Infinite Obliteration, potentially. That a powerful option against Andrew Brown's deck, which also would give him information about how Brown's sideboarded, which, if this match is going to go to further games, will be particularly relevant.
So Liliana -2, mills a couple cards, brings back Nissa. Nissa comes down again, fetches a forest, and with 2 black mana left, we may see a Grasp of Darkness. Indeed we do, taking out that Wretched Griff and clearing up Andrew's side of the battlefield. Now, it is Andrew's turn. We do know that Andrew has a copy of Emrakul, his 1 copy of Emrakul that he boarded in, lurking in his hand there, so a powerful endgame looming there for Andrew Brown.
Yeah, a lot of cards already in Brown's graveyard. Nissa's here on both sides of the battlefield. Andrew Brown fetching up a forest with his.
This will allow Nissa to transform. Now, importantly, Emrakul could not come out this turn. Sam Pardee has that copy of Dark Petition in his hand, which could be used to fetch up Infinite Obliteration. The big question here in my mind, Tim, is Sam Pardee going to pull the trigger on that Infinite Obliteration, and what will he name? If he names Emrakul, he can strip that right out of Andrew Brown's hand before it can hit the battlefield. That would be huge. However, Sam knows that Andrew Brown only has 1 copy of Emrakul, so that may not be a priority for him yet. So it's going to be really intense to see what he does with this turn. This could be a big decider of what happens in this game.
And of course, 3 different powerful Eldrazi in Andrew Brown's hand here. Any one of them is going to have a big impact on this board. Sam Pardee with a wealth of options available to him. These are the real testing moments for even the greatest players, where you have so many different lines that you can work through. Dark Petition means that Pardee has access to every single card in his deck if he so chooses. And of course, on top of that, there are all of the other cards just simply in Pardee's hand, which will be slightly more mana-efficient options available to him.
Now, I do believe Sam has 2 copies of Grasp of Darkness in his graveyard there, which will enable Spell Mastery. That means Dark Petition adds 3 black mana to his mana pool. So we may see him get a 3 or 4 mana spell here and just cast it right away. Of course, Sam does not have to show Andrew or us what card he got, so the suspense will remain for a few moments here.
These players, of course, had deck lists overnight. They've had the opportunity to test somewhat, so they will have a sense of where the sweats really come from. And I can't help but think that Andrew Brown has to worry when his opponent has access to whatever he wants. Elder Deep Fiend is named.
Okay, so there's the Infinite Obliteration, but it's Elder Deep Fiend that's named. And, you know, Sam is going to be happy to get that Elder Deep Fiend out of Andrew Brown's hand. He is not going to be happy to see that one of Emrakul already in Andrew Brown's hand and ready to come out very soon.
Elder Deep Fiend, such a disruptive force that I think it's a very sensible name here. And with 4 copies, the best chances of hitting it and the best chances of disrupting what can be a very, very painful sequence of turns that can be set up with with the Eldrazi Octopus.
I absolutely agree. That's like plan A, and the reason for Infinite Obliteration coming in, I think for sure, is to name Elder Deep Fiend as a default. And of course, you know, Sam had no knowledge of Andrew Brown's hand. He didn't know that one Emrakul was there. It's much more likely that he's going to hit Elder Deep Fiend, and did, but really just unfortunate for him that Andrew's draw has worked out this way. But the game is not over yet, so let's see how these next couple turns proceed.
Liliana goes a digging. Doesn't find too much. In fact, no creatures in Sam Pardee's graveyard to get back there, so that one straightforwardly just adding to the graveyard a little more. Nissa ticking up and finding an additional land, and it's a big one for Andrew Brown there. Sanctum of Ugin.
So my Emrakul currently costs 9, right? Would you agree with that?
Instant sorcery creature land?
Yep.
Players just counting out Emrakul there. I believe it costs 9 mana right now, which Andrew does have this turn.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Andrew Brown really not that far off being able to activate the formidable ability of his Shaman of the Forgotten Ways here. Not a common one, but when it happens, very powerful. For now, though, speaking of power, we have Emrakul, the Promised End. We've seen plenty of it in this top 8 thus far, coming from Andrew Brown's sideboard. This time round, though, he also gets to search up another creature, in this case a World Breaker, while casting his Emrakul, the Promised End, thanks to that Sanctum of Ugin. So the hits keep on coming from Andrew Brown. We'll get a chance to see what he can do with Sam Pardee's turn, where he has a fair amount of mana to work with and lots of cards in hand for Sam Pardee.
Let's take a pain. 18. Sorry, I'll just tell you what to do.
Yes.
You're gonna Ruinous Path here on Liliana. Then you're going to Grasp of Darkness, your own Nissa. And then it's your turn.
So Andrew Brown controlling Sam Pardee's turn there. He used Ruinous Path to take out Sam's Liliana, and then Grasp of Darkness to take out Sam's own Nissa, as well as a point of damage off the Llanowar Wastes just for rub-ins.
Yeah, a nice option, of course, to use up card in Sam Pardee's hand to kill off Nissa rather than simply attacking her into Emrakul. But Ruinous Path was the pickup for Sam Pardee that turn, meaning that Emrakul will not be hanging around for now. Shaman of the Forgotten Ways also being killed off there by Ultimate Price. So Andrew Brown has to lean on some of the various other Eldrazi available to him.
Now remember, Andrew did set up that World Breaker on top from the Sanctum of Ugin. Has access to that.
Shivan Reef there coming off Nissa Sage Animist. And Pardee with just Liliana left in hand here. Liliana takes a bit of time to deal with the likes of Eldrazi.
I will World Break your Forest.
So a forest being taken down there by the World Breaker. Sam Pardee quick to replace it, I would imagine, with that Evolving Wilds. At some point, Brown has an interesting option to use Lashweed Lurker to put a card back on top of Pardee's deck. If you can do so at a time when there's not either a Liliana in play or a shuffle outlet in the form of Evolving Wilds, then that could potentially shut Sam Pardee down for a turn if he doesn't have a whole lot going on anyway. There is Liliana.
Sam here has Liliana. That'll give him some options. He could, for example, bring back a Nissa, just try to get some value. Looks like that is the play here. Replaces the land that the World Breaker took out. Now, this is going to leave both Planeswalkers vulnerable to Andrew Brown's attack. on the following turn, but at least it keeps Andrew Brown busy for a turn and lets Sam get a little bit of card flow. Sam is behind from this point in the game, but he's not nearly as far behind as we expected him to be when Andrew Brown landed that Emrakul a couple turns ago. So good job to Sam Pardee staying in this game so far, and I would say he still has a shot.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Draws into Kalitas, Traitor of Get there off Nissa Sage Animist. Another Sanctum of Ugin, and lovely pickup here for Andrew Brown. Gets an additional one from Nissa Sage Animist, so a big Eldrazi this turn is going to cause a lot of triggers.
I'll top your Lilana.
So this is that Lashweed Lurker that you mentioned there, Tim. Puts Liliana on top. That'll leave Nissa standing alone, likely to be taken out by the Worldbreaker here. And Andrew Brown gets to shuffle up again, and Sam Pardee says, I've had enough. I'm just too far behind here. Although I'm not actually dead, nothing I can draw is really going to help me here.
And he knows that at least one of the cards he's going to draw the following turn is going to be that Liliana. He's super far behind, and even though the life totals may not have suggested it, Andrew Brown had very much put together a board state where he was going to take that one. So we get a chance to jump back to our other match. We heard that before sideboarding, Lukas Blohon was in rough shape for this match, but sideboarding has now happened. We'll get a chance to find out exactly how Lukas Blohon intends to win this match against Ken Yukuhiro now that he's been able to adjust his 60, utilizing his full 75 cards. So out of the sideboard, there are some fairly obvious ones. We saw Infinite Obliteration being great for Sam Pardee in the other match. 2 copies of it in Lukas Blohon's sideboard. That one seems like a straightforward inclusion. Gideon, Ally of Zendikar, another trickier to deal with permanent that grants longer term advantage. Transgress the Mind, yes, love it. Duress, yes. We see it here from Lukas Blohon and Ken Yukuhiro conveniently laying out the 2 spells that potentially are going to be able to be taken here. Collected Defiance and a Nissa's Pilgrimage. Not too much going on in Yukuhiro's hand here. Lots of land alongside a Tireless Tracker. And with one of these spells being taken away, it does not look like Ken Yukuhiro is going to be having a stellar early set of turns for this game.
And Tim, this provides some great insight into why this matchup improves so much for Lukas Blohon. He gets to bring in a tremendous amount of hand disruption, 4 copies of Duress. We see one here. And classically, black hand disruption has been very powerful against red-green ramp decks because ramp decks are so likely to just flood out. They just have a lot more cards devoted to getting mana onto the battlefield and much fewer cards that actually do anything at all. So that's one reason. The second reason is we talked about Lukas Blohon having his deck be so well set up against creature decks with all these cards like Languish and Grasp of Darkness that are just ineffective against Ken Yukuhiro's ramp deck. Lukas actually gets to sideboard all of those out. So it's not just about the great cards that he's bringing in, but it's also about the dead cards that he's bringing out.
Well, read the bones there from Lukas Blohon, letting him set up his draws a little bit. He kept a Ruinous Path around, I believe, and Tireless Tracker the play here for Ken Yukuhiro. I'll be interested to see how long that one lasts. Gets killed off immediately. Lukas Blohon continues to advance his board, though it looks like Ken Yukuhiro finding that Hedron Archive, he will at least have one way of advancing his mana here.
That's a huge pickup after the Duress there. But here comes Gideon. Now, I've talked with players who are playing Emrakul decks, and they have said Gideon is one of the cards that they actually fear a lot. It just does so much. It attacks for a lot. It's really hard to neutralize effectively, even when you do resolve an Emrakul. It's just one of those threats that persists and is very difficult for the Emrakul decks to deal with.
Well, a Collected Defiance stealing 3 of the required 4 and a second copy required to actually kill off Gideon. But you could see there, we talk about card advantage in terms of how many cards it takes you to deal with one of your opponents. 2 Collected Defiance used to kill off 1 Gideon, and there's still a Knight Ally token around. Lukas Blohon has to feel fairly happy with how that exchange went.
Absolutely. It is worth mentioning that Ken Yukuhiro did get to escalate the second copy, allowing him to discard 2 of his cards that weren't so good and cash those in for 2 new cards off the top of his library, which again is really helpful in the ramp deck that is likely to end up with extra useless mana sources in the late game. So now we're back here on Lukas Blohon's turn. He does have that Knight token attacking. He's got a couple options in his hand, but decides just to pass back, leaving up Archangel Abyssin for the end of Ken's turn.
This tracker from Ken. Plays a land and is going to be getting a clue here. Grasp of Darkness available to Lukas Blohon here if he so chooses.
Now, really wise of Lukas to leave in some number of copies of Grasp of Darkness here. Otherwise, he could get taken to town by Tireless Tracker. Now, it's always tricky with these ramp decks that have very few creatures, but the ones that they do have are very powerful. And it's a really good thing for Lukas that he left himself an answer here to this Tireless Tracker. So sure enough, Archangel Avacyn comes down at the end of the turn, provides some pressure on the board, rather. And Lukas thinking through what he has here. Now, one option is to play Kalidas, Trader of Get, and follow up with a Grasp of Darkness on the Tireless Tracker. That's a little bit of an aggressive move. He has to think about, is he willing to put so much on the battlefield and potentially open himself up to something like a Chandra Flamecaller, doing a -4 and sweeping the board. So it's possible we see him take a more conservative line than that.
I mean, one thing I know about Lukas Blohon from having watched him play quite a lot on the GP circuit and at various PTs is that he's not afraid of taking his time to establish control. Watching him play in the top 8 of GP Brussels, where he was on Esper control and pretty much the entirety of the top 8 that he faced was Team Eureka with Collected Company, Rally the Ancestors. He learned a lot and he played very well, impressed me a lot in that win. Big swings here from Blohon, knocking Ken Yukuhiro down from 18, I believe, down to just 12 there. And Kalitas holding things on the ground.
And the attack first leaves Blohon the option to post-combat either play the Grasp of Darkness or the Read the Bones. Decides just to pass instead. Allows the clue to be cracked and then responds with the Grasp.
Gets a zombie for his trouble. Emrakul there, the pickup. It's on the back of Ken Yukuhiro's sleeves and indeed on the front of at least one of his cards in hand.
Also worth noting that Kalitas does exile the creatures that die while it's on the battlefield, which is relevant for delirium purposes.
Only the ones that die, though. This is not the same as for the likes of perhaps Anafen's the Foremost, which some of you may have played with previously. It's very much a matter of Kalitas is eating those creatures as they go from the battlefield to the graveyard. Where the zombies come from, well, I wouldn't want to say.
Back here in Ken Yukuhiro's turn, he does have yet another copy of Collective Defiance as well as Tormenting Voice. And Emrakul, which I'm not sure he can cast yet. So thinking through his options, looks like he has 2, 4, 6, 8 mana available to him. I don't think he has 5 different card types in his graveyard, so I believe Emrakul not being an option here. Thinking about if he wants to cast either the Collective Defiance or Tormenting Voice. I could see casting Tormenting Voice and throwing away Collective Defiance, looking at 2 new cards, maybe trying to hit a land drop and set up for Emrakul next turn. Although he is under a lot of pressure on the battlefield, stands to be taking 13 damage, actually, if Shambling Vents is activated. So 2, 4, 8, 11, 13 power represented on Lukas Blohon's side of the battlefield. So then again, he may want to use that Collective Defiance just to take out one of those tokens and knock Lukas Blohon down to 11 points of power. Hope to top deck next turn to cast the Emrakul and maybe get back in the game after that, but a really, really tough situation for Ken Yukuhiro here.
You can see Ken doing a lot of math here, just trying to figure out the best option available to him.
Now, it's really tricky because if he casts Tormenting Voice, he doesn't want to discard Emrakul, which would mean discarding Collective Defiance, which means he doesn't have a burn spell to take out one of the creatures. And if he doesn't top deck something, then he'll die to Lukas's turn, to Lukas's board next turn.
So cashes in the Hedron Archive as the best way of trying to get something going here, both in terms of fuel for the Tormenting Voice and potentially just the answers that he needs.
The trouble is that sets him behind on mana. Although it puts an artifact in his graveyard, it denies him 2 mana production. He does find a land to recoup that a little bit, but he has to be careful not to get himself too far away from Emrakul, because that's really the light at the end of the tunnel here. He wants to survive till he can cast the Emrakul. Goes for a Tormenting Voice here, it looks like. And that leaves him with 3 mana, so I think his backup plan is just a Collective Defiance, one of the tokens here, knocking Lukas Blohon down to 11 points of power represented on his side of the board.
Now, of course, this plan could look a little scary in the face of something along the lines of Gideon to pump the team. Collective Defiance killing off
actually takes off Kalitas, yeah. I was confusing. It deals 3 damage to a player, but 4 to a creature.
So Avacyn transforms now, and Ken only facing down the 1 creature, but a powerful one, and about to be joined by its untransformed version at some point. Avacyn the Purifier there will be able to get in for 6. And Read the Bones, allowing Lukas Blohon to take a look at those 2 lands on the top of his deck and decide if he thinks he can do better. Currently just resolving his scry. 4 card types in graveyard for Ken Yukuhiro. Lukas Blohon carefully figuring out exactly how likely Emrakul is to come into play the next turn. Keeps 1 land on top, puts 1 to the bottom, draws that land plus another card. It looks like Gideon is the pickup here, alongside that land. And along comes the Planeswalker, immediately powering out a Knight Ally token. Many different things that Ken Yukuhiro needs to deal with here.
Takes a deep breath.
Well, Emrakul the Promised End offers him a different kind of set of options. He draws for Lukas's turn. Now, in other circumstances, you might well want to just sacrifice Gideons in order to create an emblem but get them off the board, but in point of fact, that's not necessarily going to be great for Ken Yukuhiro here.
Yeah, unfortunately, nothing Ken can do to survive that turn between the 2 creatures on the battlefield, the creature land, the Shambling Vent that Lukas Blohon had, the Gideon there, as well as another Archangel Avacyn waiting in the wings. Just too many threats for Ken Yukuhiro to stabilize against. So Lukas Blohon does take that 3rd game of the match, making it 1-2, and showcasing us that, yes, indeed, this match does change post-sideboard.
Well, we get a chance to jump back to our other match here on the left of our screen. That is Sam Pardee. On the right, Andrew Brown. And we found that in both of our matches on this half of the bracket, even though game 1s, I say game 1s, the unsideboarded games have all gone in one direction. So far, sideboarded games going the other way, denoting the importance of the full 75, not just the starting 60. There we see Andrew Brown's stats. He's not been on the Pro Tour for as long as many of the players in this top 8, but is carving out something of a name for himself. He's already put up his 2 Pro Tour top 8s now. This is his 2nd one. And look at all those cards in hand. Very few of them land. He's not going to mind too much if Primal Druid gets dealt with, though. Matter Reshaper also potentially a way of getting him ahead on mana, and Shaman of the Forgotten Ways also doing good work there.
So one interesting note there is Andrew Brown has Jace Vryn's Prodigy, but declined to play it on turn 2, instead adding Primal Druid to the battlefield. I think that's an acknowledgement that Sam Pardee has so much removal in his deck that he doesn't want to expose the Jace to removal and fall behind. Would rather spend his mana on something that Sam is not going to remove. Now, Sam, on the other hand, has added Kalitas, Trader of Get, just a phenomenal card in this matchup. Of course, whenever a creature an opponent controls would die, it's exiled instead, and that prevents Andrew Brown from getting all of that value from things like the Primal Druid and the Matter Reshaper. So that's going to be a high priority for Andrew Brown to try to deal with in some way, but unfortunately, in the red, blue, and green colors, there aren't a lot of good ways to deal with Kalitas.
Yeah, Kalitas in play, very powerful indeed against Andrew Brown's deck. None of those death triggers going to work out for him. ruinous path here, dealing with Jace and offering a token for Sam Pardee.
Liliana ticks up on Matter Reshaper.
And of course, Liliana and Kalitas, they have a kind of a friendship going on. One of them likes to eat zombies. Both of them like to make zombies. If Andrew Brown isn't able to find a way of effectively attacking Liliana, he may find himself on the wrong side of a lot of zombies.
Now, Andrew, end of turn, goes with a Grapple with the Past. Now, again, another reason why the exiling from Kalitas is relevant is he's unable to bring back that Jace with Grapple with the Past. So that's going to kind of shut down the development of Andrew's graveyard toolbox over time. But Andrew adds a Shaman of the Forgotten Ways to the battlefield just to increase his mana production a little bit. And at some point is going to want to try to get that Kozilek's Return to sweep the board and remove that Kalitas. At some point in this game, that's going to be part of his game plan.
Kalitas, we saw it in the other match, not necessarily doing much more than being a 3-4 lifelinker a lot of the time. Here, though, doing so much more for Sam Pardee, really putting the screws to Andrew Brown's plan. Nissa Vastwood Seer from Sam Pardee, who's just got plenty to do each and every turn of this game. We saw a little look across for Andrew Brown at him there. While everything's working for Sam, not quite so much for Andrew Brown. And Liliana at a very scary loyalty at this point in the game.
Yeah, it is -7 for that ultimate. And let me tell you, that ultimate, the scaling on that gets pretty crazy over time. It's going to be very, very hard to deal with. Now, each cast of Kozilek's Return can sweep away for some zombies, but that army just keeps growing bigger and bigger. So Andrew Brown going to need to prioritize answering that Liliana in some way if he can as soon as possible.
Yeah, the thing that's scary about zombies isn't one zombie, it's the inevitability that sooner or later those zombies will get you. They represent kind of time in the classic horror allegory, and, well, when Liliana's ultimate comes along, it does then mean that your time may have run out.
Okay, so important here. Andrew Brown has picked up an Elder Deep Fiend. That's a huge draw. So he has had Kozilek's Return in his hand, but what he really wants to do is get a Kozilek's Return in his graveyard and then cast a big Eldrazi to get that 5 damage to everything. Now, the trick is that Liliana has also been ticking up. The other tricky thing about this board state is Kalitas can sacrifice a zombie to add 2+1/+1 counters. That puts his toughness up to 6, and Sam Pardee has wisely left up that 3 mana required to do that. So even if Andrew Brown can get Kozilek's Return into his graveyard this turn and cast Elder Deep Fiend, which he can do, Sam can then sacrifice a zombie to put his Kalitas out of range. So really tricky turn to navigate for Andrew Brown.
This is really tough, man.
Judge coming over, reminding him he does need to make a play. Andrew says it's a really tough turn. I totally agree. Let's sit back and watch what he decides to do.
Yeah, I mean, the Deep Fiend can also just simply clear the path a little bit so you can get some attacks in on Liliana.
Double blue.
But not enough to be able to kill her off entirely.
So this is Andrew's main phase. He's added double blue with the Shaman. Looks like he's going for a Elder Deep Fiend. And yes, indeed, Tim, I think he is taking... Oh, first it is the Kozilek's Return. Okay. So still with some mana floating then.
The good thing is that getting Kozilek's Return into the graveyard by casting it means there's already 2 damage
That's
on
right.
Kalitas.
Very, very true.
Matter Reshaper getting killed off by Kozilek's Return, turned into a zombie. And Andrew Brown knowing that he needs to win this game. He cannot afford to wait for another sideboarded game. This is the last sideboarded game for him if he loses it. He, in fact, needs to win one more, even if he succeeds.
So here's the
taking down
tricky
this
thing.
game.
He can cast the Deep Fiend, and If he flashes back Kozilek's Return, it means he'll have no attackers to attack Liliana, and that leaves Liliana able to ultimate. If instead he were to tap down Sam Pardee's creatures and try to attack and chip away at Liliana, well, then he wouldn't be able to deal with that Kalitas.
And a parting shot there from Kalitas. One zombie coming into play just as the big legend is killed off. And of course, one zombie does help the math in terms of Sam Pardee for what happens with Liliana's ultimate.
Damn good question.
Andrew Brown here searching through his deck, and you see that wince. He knows that he's going to be up against it for the rest of this game, however long that may be.
If any of you guys out there are math majors, your homework is to find a closed form solution for how many zombies you have on turn N, depending on your starting number of zombies after activating Liliana's ultimate. You can go to work on that.
Exponential math is fun, kids. Yeah, this is the kind of weight that Sam Pardee doesn't mind. He knows that he's going to have a good turn coming up. All of that loyalty going away, and we get a chance to check out the Liliana emblem. That meaning that at the end of each of Sam Pardee's turns, he's going to get more zombies. Now, the number of zombies he's going to get is equal to the number of zombies he already has, and then an additional 2. So in this case, 1 zombie in play, 3 additional zombies at the end of turn. That escalates rapidly.
Sorry. Alright, that's fine.
Looks like the judge there just issuing Andrew Brown a warning about playing a little bit faster there, so he'll have to keep that in mind going forward. Now remember, these are untimed rounds, but it still is a rule of playing in a Magic tournament that you need to make your plays at a reasonable pace, and you know, sometimes with these tricky board states, the players tend to slow down and think quite a bit, and that's totally understandable, but we do have to keep things moving on track.
So we have a mystery morph alongside Sylvan Advocate and 3 additional zombies for Sam Pardee. At some point, there's not going to be enough space on Sam Pardee's side of the table for all of the tokens. And while we have a prodigious amount of zombie tokens available in our coverage area, at some point it may prove difficult to find enough to represent what's going on here, though at that point I would imagine that Andrew Brown would be scooping up his cards.
So Andrew actually sacrifices his Elder Deep Fiend to play Wretched Griff just to draw a card, just to dig a little bit deeper. Adds a Matter Reshaper and a Jace to the battlefield. He needs to dig for something huge. I mean, I think what he might be looking for is his copy of Emrakul. And Tim, let me tell you something. If we see an ultimated Liliana emblem here cranking out a zombie army against an Emrakul, that's just going to be a top 8 dream come true for me. However, things may not get that far. It looks like Sam Pardee turning up Den Protector, Ruinous Path on that Jace, prevents that card flow for Andrew Brown, crashing in with a bunch of zombies here. Matter Shaper likely to get in the way just to dig a little bit deeper for Andrew Brown, try to find something to get out of this situation.
Andrew Brown dropping to 5 on this attack, and while one of the zombies is dealt with, soon going to be replaced. End of turn, 5 more zombie tokens. That is a lot of zombies, says Andrew Brown. He is not wrong there. 5 life for Andrew Brown, 8 zombies in play for Sam Pardee. Kozilek's Return is what Andrew Brown needs just to keep his head above water.
I think the best draw would be Grapple with the Past, milling Kozilek's Return, finding an Eldrazi to cast, and sweeping the board. That's like step 1, I think, for Andrew getting back in this game. Twirls around his card. He's not looking happy right now. That is a lot of zombies.
Yep, 17.
It's an Elder Deep Fiend.
Go.
I believe that Sam Pardee has more zombies than this Elder Deep Fiend has tentacles.
I have effects. Sure. Take 2.
Only able to tap down 4 of them potentially.
Okay.
And the rest come in.
Still.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, Andrew Brown sacks the Sanctum of Ugin. I don't think this can lead to anything really happening here.
Well, fetching another Elder Deep Fiend.
But isn't he just dead on board to the zombies attacking? He has no cards in hand. Am I missing something?
Gets to cast the second Elder
Oh,
Deep
right,
Fiend.
right. Sure. Gotcha.
The sad thing about this is that all of that blue mana is hurting him. So Andrew Brown dropping to 1 simply to tread water here in this game with these octopuses.
So I can still hit grapple.
Yeah, so Andrew says, I can still hit grapple. Yeah, indeed. He needs to grapple milling Kozilek's return into another Eldrazi, which is extremely unlikely, but could happen.
Clue, fetch second clue.
And Sam Pardee just getting some clues ready to go just in case the impossible happens here and Andrew Brown finds a way out of the situation.
Crack one of the clues.
We're going to need to find, at present, 10 more zombie tokens for this board.
And my turn make.
This is awesome, getting to see Lilana just going off here in the top 8. Loving it.
Oh, we're
Boom.
having to use dice. Sam Pardee, your Liliana emblem has defeated our...
He's exhausted the supply of zombie tokens at the feature match table.
A whole bunch more zombies.
Jeez.
They're either gonna die or.
Judge, my opponent is
or
rubbing
attack.
it in. Can I get a woot woot?
Andrew Brown now just enjoying himself. I think he can read the writing on the wall here.
Sorry, I'm kind of wasting everybody's time. I'll just scoop.
I don't think our time is that.
Declares, I'm wasting everyone's time.
Shakes the hand there of Sam Pardee. The number 1 seed going into this top 8 is going to be advancing to the semi-finals, defeating Andrew Brown. Andrew Brown picks up a single game, but was not able to pick up the match. We will find out whether or not Lukas Blohon, having started 2 games down, is able to do a little better than Andrew Brown did. Heading into game 4 now of this, the last of the quarterfinals here at Pro Tour Eldritch Moon.
Awesome match there, though.
All right, so just kicking off this game 4. Yukuhiro on the play here. Saw a much more sort of proactive start from Lukas Blohon, starting with a bit of targeted discard early doors from him. It will be interesting to see whether or not he's able to do the same in this 4th game. And here's the duress. It is revealing, oh, there's nothing much going on from Ken Yukuhiro at all here. 3 lands and just 1 spell left after that duress. The Collected Defiance, well, Tyler's Tracker off the top.
Okay, that's a nice
might
one.
mean something here. Also, of course, drawing cards for Ken Yukuhiro as and when he gets to investigate. What can Lukas Blohon fire back with? Well, there's removal. He's got the Grasp of Darkness.
And again, really nice for Lukas, leaving in just enough removal to handle these tireless trackers. I really like that a lot. He's been fortunate enough to get those off the battlefield right away. And Ken Yukuhiro's got to be feeling a little bit nervous here. He started this match up 2-0, lost the last one, and he could feel things slipping away from him a little bit. Now, we do believe Lukas Blohon is favored in these sideboard matchups.
Yeah, not too much going on from Yukuhiro that turn, opening a door for Lukas Blohon to be able to resolve or read the bones without having to worry about being behind on the board. Does so, keeps his lands coming. And Yukuhiro here, he may need to go for a big Collective Defiance in order to just reset his hand a little bit.
Now, I do want to highlight really nice previous turn from Lukas Blohon. He has a ton of gas in his hand, but was short on lands. That Read the Bones picked up 2 more swamps. So as you said, Tim, keeping those lands coming is going to help him get into the mid-game and really take control of what's going on in this matchup.
Collective Defiance, still really the main action available to Ken Yukuhiro. He has now got to traverse the Elvenwald. Really wants to be able to cast that with Delirium because lands is the one thing that he does have going on in terms of what he's drawn so far this game. But Lukas Blohon,
Can we get a Delirium count on Ken Yukuhiro?
different options available to him here. A bunch of Planeswalkers. Decides to go with, I think that's Gideon there, bringing along a Night Alley alongside it. And Yep, those lands just keep on coming for Lukas Blohon. He doesn't mind at all. His control deck has plenty to do with additional mana, and if he's able to just string Planeswalker, Planeswalker, Planeswalker here, then we could be fast going on to a Game 5.
And Gideon, again, just such a great card to have in this matchup. Provides a ton of pressure. It's very resilient. Costs Ken Yukuhiro a lot of time and cards to answer if he does want to answer it. Otherwise, just puts him on a huge clock. And knowing what we know about Ken Yukihiro's hand, he does not have a lot of great tools at his disposal. He's going to need to find them quickly if he wants to answer Lukas Blohon's threats.
Well, Chandra, a fantastic pickup for Ken Yukuhiro. He's got a Nissa's Pilgrimage. He's got a Goblin Dark Dwellers. Chandra is the sort of card that could potentially get him back in this game. Lets him attack down a Gideon if it gets left unprotected at some point. Lets him do a fair amount in terms of just controlling the board in general. But he's going to have to string a few things together here because not quite the land to cast it. We may see a Nissa's Pilgrimage from him here this turn, just in terms of getting his mana all set up.
Yeah, trouble is he doesn't have too much time. I mean, if he allows this Gideon to go unchecked for too long, he's going to be facing down a bunch of knights or potentially taking a bunch of damage from Gideon. Gideon could potentially tick up in loyalty and be harder to answer. And Lukas Blohon gets to untap and have his mana ready to react. So goes with the Goblin Dark Dwellers instead, I believe into a Traverse the Ulvenwald, finds a forest. That'll set him up for Chandra Flamecaller next turn. Actually liking this quite a bit. If the Goblin Dark Dwellers goes unanswered, Chandra can come down and sweep away those Knight tokens, and then the Goblin Dark Dwellers can finish off the Gideon.
I mean, the fact it has Menace alone means that it's a little bit harder for Lukas Blohon to just rely on blocking in order to protect his Gideon.
Absolutely. And from Ken's standpoint, he has to imagine that Lukas has sideboarded out a lot of his creature removal. So these Goblin Dark Dwellers, again, from Ken's standpoint, stand a good chance of surviving. Now, taking a look at Lukas Blohon's hand, he actually does have a couple of removal spells to answer. Grasp of Darkness does the trick perfectly. Also has the option of adding Obnixilis Reignited to his Planeswalker team there, as well as Archangel Avacyn. So lots of good answers here from Lukas Blohon, as well as the Gideon on the board. He is in great shape.
Worth noting, of course, that Lukas Blohon's life total already taken a fair amount of hits here, and largely at his own sort of choice. He's got Caves of Kolos that's been hurting him a touch. Read the Bones is a couple more damage. And Gideon himself getting stuck in here rather than anything else. One extra point of loyalty, meaning that Gideon much, much safer against much of what Ken Yukuhiro has going on, though Chandra may be enough to push that a little out of range.
Yeah, so the Knight token staying home there means that Lukas has decided not to use Grasp of Darkness on the Goblin Dark Dwellers, decides instead to leave his mana available either for an instant speed grasp as a reactive surprise, or Archangel Avacyn to come down as well.
Well, here comes Chandra, immediately hitting the battlefield and adding 2 elementals with +1 loyalty there. Everything coming at Lukas Blohon's Planeswalker. He plays Archangel Avacyn, blocks the elementals, lets Gideon tick down to 1, and ultimately there, both players played a Mythic that turn, but I think Lukas Blohon kind of finished up ahead.
So going back a bit, I really like that heads-up thinking of Lukas Blohon where he ticked up the Gideon to get in the 5 damage. I think that was as much to put Gideon up to 5 loyalty as it was to get in damage. Knowing that Goblin Dark Dwellers has Menace and hits for 4, that puts the Gideon into a safe range, and indeed things played out just the way Lukas Blohon had anticipated.
And of course, now Chandra left very easily attackable here for Lukas Blohon. He can choose to do so with Gideon, or perhaps split things a little differently and use his other creatures in play in order to take down the Planeswalker.
I really like the way that Lukas is thinking about what Ken Yukuhiro has access to and how he could spend his mana on the following turn, and setting things up to be just annoying enough that no matter what Ken does, he can't answer all of the threats that Lukas is presenting. And that's really a great way to attack these ramp decks, is like thinking about, okay, what's the worst thing for me my opponent could do next turn, and how can I set up so that no matter what my opponent does, you know, they can't answer all the different threats that I'm presenting.
We see there just a wealth of powerful options in Lukas Blohon's hand. Taking his time here to figure out what he wants to do, but it looks like he's made a decision. Ruinous Path on the Planeswalker, and that meaning that a much more straightforward set of attacks straight at Ken Yukuhiro here. And that enough to put Ken Yukuhiro down to pretty low life total here. Just the 6 points of life and still mana up in terms of more removal from the black-white control deck of Lukas Blohon. Ken Yukuhiro very much on the back foot here in this game 4. I think we could very well see a game 5.
Yeah, picks up just another Nissa's Pilgrimage that turn. Not going to help him out here at all. And we can really see why these ramp players have been saying they're so scared of Gideon. It's just such a difficult card for them to deal with. And down comes Grasp of Darkness to take out that Goblin Dark Dwellers. Ken Yukuhiro with no board at just 4 life, staring down Gideon, Avacyn, a Knight token, as well as all of the cards in Lukas Blohon's hand that he has access to. It just seems like an impossible situation for Ken Yukuhiro to get out of.
Well, Collective Defiance is certainly going to help here. He can point some damage at a creature, also damage at Lukas to be able to deal with Gideon. But if he kills off a creature here, then Avacyn is going to transform.
That's right. So
sorry, 4 at Avacyn.
4 damage to Avacyn, 3 to Lukas Blohon, and exchanging his hand for new cards. Leaves up a forest, I imagine that's hoping to draw into Traverse the Ulvenwald. Does not draw into it.
Another Gideon, the draw there for Lukas Blohon. Attacks him for 2, dropping Ken Yukuhiro to just 2 life. And can just hold his mana up here because there is Archangel Avacyn in hand for him, and that one should be good enough to close this game out. What does Ken Yukuhiro draw here? He already had a Tireless Tracker and a Tormenting Voice. A Game Trail, the pickup, so that one potentially good fodder for the Tormenting Voice, or I guess a clue off Tireless Tracker, but I just don't think there's time for that clue here. Yep, another spin of the wheel. Tormenting Voice draws into a new Tormenting Voice and a Hangerback Walker for 2. But Archangel Avacyn flashed in. We are going to be seeing a game 5 here between Lukas Blohon and Ken Yukuhiro. What a turnaround in Duke in terms of sideboarding and what it's done to this matchup, because honestly, games 1 and 2, it really didn't feel like Lukas Blohon had the right set of answers for what Ken Yukuhiro had going. Emrakul was just coming down quite happily, and Lukas wasn't able to put on any kind of pressure here. But it's kind of almost an aggro control deck from Lukas Blohon as we approach these sideboarded games. He aggressively attacks the hand of Ken Yukuhiro and then just plays out threats and beats him up.
Yeah, absolutely true. This matchup is just fascinating to me to watch. Now, playing a control deck that doesn't have access to blue has historically in Magic been, something that either hasn't existed or when it does exist requires a very intimate knowledge of the metagame and lining up your answers for their threats in just a perfect way. So it's really, really amazing to see Lukas Blohon just expertly navigating this matchup and using all of his tools to just disrupt Ken Yukuhiro in the perfect ways, and then also needing to close out the game before Ken Yukuhiro is able to top deck into something powerful like Emrakul. So there's kind of this, like you said, yeah, it's almost like an aggro control deck or a disruptive aggro deck. Not aggressive in the sense that he's trying to end the game quickly, but aggressive in the sense that he wants to give himself this sort of narrow window where he's thrown an opponent off balance and then can close out the game before his opponent can recover.
Yeah, Avacyn, Archangel, just doing a huge amount of work in these post-sideboard games, able to protect creatures, able to attack back, and let's take a look at everything that Avacyn has going on here. So we have 2 faces to Avacyn, and the first side of it is the one that has ultimately seen the most impact on the board in these games that we've seen thus far. Flash, massively important, such that even on an empty board, this represents an attacker that's hard to deal with, but then giving indestructibility to creatures does mean that we can set up some more sort of complicated blocks and so on without losing anything. And I have seen some kind of nifty plays from Lukas Blohon using Avacyn the Purifier as well, even into a very, very complicated board where straightforward attacking wasn't good enough. Avacyn the Purifier, just the 3 damage to an opponent, sometimes all you need.
Yeah, I love this card, Tim. Not only is it's powerful, it's exciting, but it also just tells the story in such an awesome way, right? Archangel Avacyn comes down, tries to protect you and your creatures, but something goes wrong, and she just sort of flips out and just starts destroying everything.
Yeah, super, super potent addition to this black-white control deck. Many of the black-white control decks we've seen in the past have been virtually creatureless. This one actually does run a fair number of creatures in the main deck. It does have the likes of Kalitas and Archangel Avacyn going on alongside Linvala the Preserver. And out of the sideboard, obviously the potential for even more creature action, at least in terms of Gideon Ally of Zendikar, the Planeswalker that is always closest to kind of being a creature, even, I would say almost even including some of the Magic Origins Planeswalkers that start out as creatures.
Absolutely. Now, the other card that's been instrumental here this weekend and in this matchup in particular is Emrakul, the Promised End, of course, a new addition from Eldritch Moon, actually sort of the marquee card of the set, right? This is the big bad guy. This is what was corrupting Innistrad. This is the shadow over Innistrad, in fact. She's a 13/13 for 13 mana, and she's actually designed, so that first line of text there I think is one of the coolest parts about the card. Costs 1 less for each card type among your graveyard. That's first of all a call out to delirium. It's sort of a super delirium in a way, which actually rewards you for even going beyond the 4-card threshold. This line of text was here to actually make the card exciting even in limited play. That was the goal of that design, was even if you open this card in limited, it's actually something you can build toward and cast reliably and will be an awesome thing that you want to do, not just a 13-mana card that sits in your sideboard. So really happy with how that turned out, and it's super cool to see the impact this card has had here this weekend.
Absolutely. A lot of different things going on with Emrakul, but when you put them all together, just a super, super powerful body. The Mythic Rare from Eldritch Moon. And we see the players, they are just looking at their opening hands, just sort of squaring up for this. Will be the final game of our quarterfinals. We will find out who it will be that will be facing Sam Pardee in the semi-finals soon enough. Either Ken Yukuhiro or Lukas Blohon. Any thoughts as to who Sam Pardee might be rooting for, Ian?
That's a great question. My guess would be he's rooting for Ken Yukuhiro to win. I think he's got that nice sideboard package of Dark Petition and Infinite Obliteration, which can help him a lot here. But anyway, we're off into the game here with a turn 1 duress from Lukas Blohon.
So he's quite a mix of cards here. Tormenting Voice, Collective Defiance, a couple of copies of Hangback Walker, and a couple of lands. So even though he's able to take either, well, we've seen the power of Collective Defiance here, but he could just take the straightforward card drawing available to Ken Yukuhiro, cannot deal with the 2 copies of Hangback Walker, and Hangback Walker potentially very good against Black-White, depending on what removal Lukas has.
So I actually love taking Tormenting Voice here. When I saw Ken Yukihiro's hand, my first instinct was, wow, this is a pretty slow hand for a ramp deck. I believe he only had 2 lands in hand, and he's got all these kind of slow and clunky cards like Hangback Walker. Now, Tormenting Voice, if left unchecked, would allow him to exchange and cycle through, get rid of a Hangback Walker, draw into more lands, or a ramp spell like Nissa's Pilgrimage. So I love taking that out here. And now, on turn 2, Lukas Blohon, with even more hand disruption, adds a Transgress the Mind.
And sees Ishkana Graph Widow picked up, but does not care too much about that one. Continues to take spells.
And again, goes with the Collective Defiance there. Same reasoning behind taking the Tormenting Voice. Now takes the Collective Defiance. Basically, that means he's saying, I like seeing what you have in your hand. I want to keep it that way. I'm going to leave you with all these cards that I know about, that I know I can deal with, and I'm going to take away your ability to cycle through those cards into something new that's potentially more problematic for me.
Well, this is how we've seen each and every one of these sideboard games go. Early discard. Read the bones in order to make my hand a little bit better. Now I'm going to clean up everything else that's going on. Lukas Blohon has to feel comparatively happy about how things are going here. Yes, he's taken a few points of damage early, but he is very much the one with the initiative, even though it's Ken Yukuhiro that has some creatures on the board.
Now, the big question to me is, has he left in enough to deal with these Hangback Walkers? Now, a double Hangback Walker draw can get out of control unless you have something like a couple of removal spells into Languish, or Anguished Unmaking to take them to exile them so that Ken Yukuhiro doesn't get the tokens. The other big card here could be Kalitas, Trader of Get, which would make those Hangback Walkers be exiled and not produce Thopter tokens when they die.
Well,
and
Kalitas
sure
has hit the battlefield, so another piece of the puzzle assembled by Lukas Blohon here. Now when he removes Hangback Walkers, assuming that he can find the removal spells to do so, he does not need to worry about those death triggers, and that a very big pickup for him. And Ishkana Graph Widow coming down for Ken Yukuhiro, but no friends for the big spider. That graveyard largely untroubled by cards at this point. No delirium to work with.
And look at the way that Ken's deck is playing out after being disrupted. He's added a couple Hangback Walkers, which are nothing in the face of Kalitas and just plays an Ishkanah Graft Widow as a Siege Mastodon, right? As a 5-mana 3/5. That's not very threatening. That's not very powerful. So, again, you know, just the disruption provided by Lukas Blohon's, you know, duresses and transgress the minds here has just been so incredible in shaping the way this game plays out that, you know, Lukas Blohon looks like he's absolutely in the driver's seat right now. Look at that hand. Fully stocked from Read the Bones. He's got a couple of Gideons, Ob Nixilis.
I mean, getting a Planeswalker on the board here seems like a great start. He goes with Ob Nixilis because Ob Nixilis is the one that's going to be able to start the removal plan going. Kills off the bigger of the two Angerback Walkers, gets a zombie, so now he's got enough creatures to block and protect that Ob Nixilis, which later, of course, will get him card advantage. Yukuhiro here, just casting a Nizza's Pilgrimage. That, I mean, it will set him up for later, but right now it's not really doing too much for him. Ken Yukuhiro, he was so close. The first two games, he was just looking like he was rocking and rolling. And Lukas Blohon here has changed the pace of this game after sideboarding, and it's just absolutely doing everything he needs to. +1 here. Lukas is going to take a point of pain, but draw an additional card. And when a control deck is drawing extra cards, you've got to be worried.
And Ken Yukuhiro just in such a tight spot here. I'm not even sure, you know, the game is far from over, but I'm not even sure what he's looking to draw into, even over the next 3 turns, right? So he cast Nizza's Pilgrimage there. He's got a forest in hand, I believe. I think 6 or 7 lands on the battlefield. 7 lands in the battlefield, but only
sorceries in the graveyard.
Only sorceries in the graveyard, and that Kalitas prevented him from getting a creature in the graveyard. So even if he finds Emrakul pretty soon, he's not going to be able to cast it for quite a while.
And here comes Gideon, just clogging up this board with all sorts of different permanents. We have 0 ability putting a 2/2 white Knight ally creature onto the battlefield. And Lukas Blohon, he knows he doesn't need to attack just yet. For now, he's going to make sure that he has his Planeswalkers good and protected. Tireless track of the play here for Yukuhiro.
Ooh, that's a nice pickup from Ken Yukuhiro. If he's going to get back into this game, that is a great start.
Yeah, every land he plays will investigate. Every clue he cracks will make that Tireless tracker just a little bit larger. If Lukas Blohon wants to kill it off, he's going to have to either use some unconditional removal or do so pretty quickly. Ob Nixilis in play, of course, is one way of removing creatures on the battlefield. Though, of course, there is the temptation to just draw more cards because there are plenty of cards in Lukas Blohon's deck which will also achieve that goal.
So interesting note here, Lukas has Transgress the Mind in his hand, which is likely to be a dead card the way this game is playing out. I mean, Ken Yukuhiro emptied his hands pretty quickly. He might fire it off this turn just because Ken played Tireless Tracker and sacrificed the clue right away and then did not play the card that he drew, which either means it's another land or it's something big that costs more than the 3 mana he had remaining, in which case Lukas would really want to get that out of his hand. So interesting to me to see if he decides to transgress this turn or to maybe hold it for later on. And there's a good chance it misses, but there's also a good chance that he takes like one of the few relevant things that Ken could have drawn out of his hand.
Ob Nixilis does kill off that Tireless Tracker, netting another zombie for Lukas Blohon. Trading in a Planeswalker for one of your opponent's creatures, not necessarily ideal, but I think they're him just respecting that the way that Ken Yukuhiro is going to get out of this hole is by drawing a lot of extra cards.
Yeah, it turns out to be a great play because the card that Yukuhiro did draw off of the clue was Evolving Wilds, which would make 2 more clues the following turn. So really nice that Lukas correctly decided to cash in his Ob Nixilis, which is not always an easy decision. You know, you want to keep your card flow going. You want to keep that personal howling mine, as we call it sometimes, on the battlefield.
Now, it looks like Lukas might be considering an attack here. He's got enough mana that he can sacrifice 2 zombies to Kalitas, at which point, well, you would have a big enough creature that's going to prove problematic even for what Ken Yukuhiro has going on. Alternatively, of course, given that he's got a second copy of Gideon Ally of Zendikar, sacrificing the first to get an emblem may be an option. But no, he's gone, I'm going to attack with both Gideon and Kalitas. This the other way that you can stop your opponent drawing out of things. You just kill them before they get a chance to get back in the game.
Now note the Kalitas is a 3/4. It could be double blocked here, but it does have that ability to sacrifice zombies to add +1/+1 counters to it. So if Ken goes for a double block here, Lukas can simply tap 3 or 6 mana, pump it up a bit, and have it survive combat.
And of course, if there's a double block and he does double pump, he will then kill off a creature, get some more zombies back. So it's not even as if it's costing him that much in terms of board presence.
Yep. Now Lukas also has Blighted Fen as an option as well, although I suspect he might leave that on the battlefield just as insurance in case Emrakul comes out later in the game, because that, in my mind, is one of the only ways he can lose this game from this position. So we'll see what he does decide to do. Yep, looks like he chows down on a zombie there. Boom, again, adds 4 +1/+1 counters.
I mean, the other great piece about this is there is lifelink on this Kalitas, so 7 points of life going to be gained in this exchange.
Yeah, and again, actually, that's the difference between dying to 1 attack and 2 attacks from Emrakul. So again, could be relevant in the way that this game plays out. That would be one of the only ways that Lukas would actually lose the game. So
yeah,
he's thinking about the right things here.
It's interesting because sometimes I find myself, when I'm playing, getting a little bit sloppy playing when I'm ahead, because it's almost like you think you can get away with everything. Lukas is thinking here about what could go wrong. How am I going to lose this game when I've had this great start?
That's a great point. Yeah, when you're feeling like you're ahead, it's actually really hard to play optimally because you have so many ways to crush your opponent that it's hard to know which one is best. But it is important when you're playing in the top 8 of a Pro Tour to stay on track and make sure you're optimizing every decision. There's a saying that when you have a good play and the best play, the good play is actually the bad play, right? Because you didn't make the best play. So you really got to keep that in mind.
Gigantic hangerback walker here from Ken Yukuhiro, but dwarfed by Kalitas. Lukas Blohon here, 15 points of damage to go.
And Lukas now knowing that that hangerback walker cast for a total of 8 mana with 4 +1/+1 counters means that Ken Yukuhiro didn't really have anything else to do with his mana on his turn, not even, really a reason to leave any mana up to bluff. So the shields are down for Ken Yukuhiro, and Lukas Blohon just thinking about the best way to take advantage of the situation to apply the most pressure to Ken Yukuhiro as possible. Goes for the Blighted Fen. Boom, lose a creature. Ken Yukuhiro sacrifices Evolving Wilds in response.
They're shuffling, effectively buying thinking time for Ken Yukuhiro about which creature he wants to sacrifice.
Yeah, deciding between Ishkana and Hangerback Walker here. Not quite sure what the relevance of sacrificing the Evolving Wilds was there.
And this is going to be a match that Ken Yukuhiro is going to be playing back in his mind and potentially, actually literally playing back to watch through a number of times, because after games 1 and 2, he was so far ahead, and it really just hasn't been his match after sideboarded games.
Yeah, absolutely true. That said, Tim, I don't see what he could have done differently this game. I think it all goes back to those first 2 turns where Lukas Blohon took the correct cards with those hand disruption spells. He took away that Tormenting Voice, then he took away the Collective Defiance, and he said, no, I'm going to lock you into this crappy hand that you have and make you play out the game with it, and that is the game indeed.
There's the handshake. Lukas Blohon, all business, takes things down. He was 2 games down, but we do play best of 5 in our top 8s at the Pro Tour, and he used every single one of those games, advancing to the semi-finals with a win. 3 games to 2 to Lukas Blohon. Congratulations to him. We will see plenty more of him in the semi-finals against Sam Pardee.
Just an amazing effort there to start 2 games down in the match, transitioning into those sideboard games, knowing you have to win all 3, but Lukas Blohon hangs in there, navigates just perfectly, uses his disruption and his answers to perfectly navigate those games and answer Ken Yukuhiro's threats. Just a masterfully played game.
Absolutely. I mean, the thing with these decks, they are 75 decks, not just 75 cards to the deck, not just 60 or 75 in use there. And we have all 4 of our semi-finalists. We're going to head things back across to the news desk now as we prepare to continue things at Pro Tour Eldritch Moon.
Thanks very much to Tim Willoughby and Ian Jeep with the call on our second set of quarterfinals. Tremendous action. I've been joined not only by Brian David Marshall, the Pro Tour historian, but also Matej Big Z Zatlkai. Great to have you with us, Matej. Sorry we don't see you in top 8 action here on your last Pro Tour as a player, officially, as it were. Yep. But a great career, and it's great to have you with us here at the news desk for our lunchtime entertainment. If you want entertainment after lunchtime, how about Luis Scott Vargas against Owen Turtenwald? That seems like a great reason to stay up for the next couple of hours or so. You're going to see best 3 out of 5 coming right up. But it is lunchtime and we've got a ton to get through, so let's get to it. And why don't we begin by a review of the quarterfinals? Let's take a look at our bracket as it stood first thing this morning here in Sydney, Australia. And we began our quarterfinal action right at the bottom of the bracket with the 2v the 7 seed. This was Luis Scott Vargas, Bant Company against Reed Duke with red-green Delirium ramp. BDM, what happened in this one?
Well, you know what? We really saw the reason people decided to play this Bant Company deck. It was able to, in 2 games, just really push forth this really aggressive game plan. Reflector Mage early on, push through my damage, Selfless Spirit as a creature in the second game to protect the team from a board sweeper, and then in the third game, which went a little longer, which saw a Dragon Lord Atarka resolve, which saw an Emrakul resolve. He's able to play this longer, grindier game, and it was Luis Scott Vargas advancing over Reed Duke 3 games to none. It was, I thought, quite a testament to the power of Bant Company.
Right, for sure. So Luis Scott Vargas advanced to the semi-finals. At the same time, well, we saw Yuta Takahashi of Japan playing Bant Company again, the same deck as Luis, essentially, up against Owen Turtenwald with Teamer Emerge. Now, this one was a little closer, but it was the American Owen Turtenwald who advanced your new player of the year to set up that semi-final clash that's coming up after lunch. Brian, this time around, although it was 3-1, Owen basically didn't get to play in game 1 at all.
Yeah, I was going to be emphasis on sort of closer. Right. Because, Owen's deck misfired in the 1 game. But, credit to Yuta Takahashi. He played great, and, the games were very close themselves, and we saw a great card out of Takahashi's sideboard. If you're wondering about how you're going to cope with these Elder Deep Fiends and these Emrakuls, and not only do I have to deal with this spell, but I have to deal with this cast trigger. Well, Summary Dismissal, which came in out of Takahashi's sideboard, looked great in that match. And Owen needed the 4th Emrakul in to win that match, and he advanced 3-1.
Yeah, extraordinary stuff. So then we had our second pair of quarterfinals. Once again, at the bracket, we had Sam Pardee up against Andrew Brown. So this was another Teamer Emerge deck in the hands of Brown and Black-Green Delirium for Sam Pardee. It was Sam Pardee who advanced in this one by 3-1. But Matej, a word for Andrew Brown. You are someone with a huge amount of experience in creating and curating a Pro Tour team with huge success. Hats off to you guys as well for terrific constructive performance, particularly, I know. But what does it take to put together? Just give us a sense for East West Bowl, what they've achieved in the last sort of 18 months.
Yeah, I mean, they're a fantastic team, and what they put together is incredible. All American players and all in the silver gold range mostly. And in 18 months, they have several platinum players, some PT top 8s on their sheets, and it's great for them, and fantastic effort. And I know Andrew Brown is heading quite a few of the efforts for creating new decks, bringing the people together, making sure everyone has a good time.
Yeah, and a Platinum Pro there. But again, hats off to you guys, because, what was it, 4 in the top 16?
Yes.
2 more in the top 25?
And the player with the best constructed record, Emmanuel Gershenson, with 9 wins and a draw.
That's pretty extraordinary
Huge relief
stuff.
for him.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that when we come to talk about the World Magic Cup races in just a little bit. But that left 1 quarterfinal remaining. That was Lukas Blohon against Ken Yukuhiro. Now, Brian David Marshall, let's just to confirm, by the way, that Blohon wins this one and goes through by 3 games to 2. But BDM, this is where the intel was just flawless, because the stuff coming in on your phone this morning was like, I'm going to tell you how this matchup's going to go.
Yeah, Martin Hughes and Lukas were up, late last night playtesting. Apparently, Martin was falling asleep with cards in his hand, and Lukas was coming over and taking the cards and picking up they were tag teaming, and they really could not figure out a way to win any kind of relevant number of games before sideboarding. It was just a terrible matchup, and they were like, well, once we get to take out this, even dozen dead cards here in game one and game two, in the case of the top best 3 out of 5, we can bring in all these other cards, and this matchup turns tremendously in our favor. We might even be favored in this match, despite the fact that we can't win 2 games to start it out. And, it's rare that you get a tidbit like that and then it actually plays out that perfectly, but that's exactly what happened, right, Matej?
Yeah, exactly, and I think that's one of the advantages of the white-black deck. It's highly versatile. You can really tune it, the main deck and the sideboard, for your matchups. And since there's so many good white and black cards in the format, it really presents a dilemma how you build the deck correctly. Lukas might have had a good game 1 deck for the meta game, but for after sideboard, I think he's pretty good against a large portion of decks.
So congratulations to Lukas Blohon. Our semi-finals are set. It will be Louis Scott Vargas against Owen Turtmide. You'll see that first. And then it will be Sam Pardee against Lukas Blohon. So make sure you've got your cocoa at the ready. Snuggle in the blankets if it's the middle of the night for you, and stay with us. It's
Only
going to be...
Luis has his cocoa at the ready.
Oh, boy. I'm really sorry about that, everybody. So, thanks very much to Brian David Marshall. You can go now. And I'm going to stay right here with Matej Big Z Sattelkai, because we're going to get a professional insight into the world of Eldritch Moon. It's time for our look at EMN in the Standard Spotlight.